Chapter 585. Most of the time, people lived for the sake of fighting for their pride. And Yi Xian wanted to fight for this pride. Sky Ascension City. This Sky Ascension City was the most mysterious city in the chaotic universe besides the Divine Kingdom. It had been 300 years since the establishment of the Order Alliance, and in these 300 years, this city had always been mysterious in the eyes of the world. It should be said that the Order Alliance was mysterious in the eyes of the world. How strong was the Order Alliance? This had always been a mystery. No one knew the true trump card of the Order Alliance, not even the Tang clan. Yi Xian didn't know. But he wanted to do it. He had already been bullied to this extent by the Order Alliance, so what else did he care about? He didn't care about anything. Either if*ck you to death or uf*ck me to death. That was the mentality Yi Xian had now. Soon, Yi Xian arrived at the foot of Sky Ascension City. But before he could walk up, a spear suddenly shot down from the sky above Sky Ascension City. Yi Xian raised his head and slashed down with his sword. Chi! As the sword descended, the spear was directly split into two. At this moment, a young man appeared in front of Yi Xian. The young man looked at Yi Xian with a solemn expression. At this moment, a voice suddenly resounded in his mind. Stand down. Stand down? It was the Star Lord's voice. The young man's face darkened. He glanced at Yi Xian. He didn't dare to disobey the Planet Lord's orders and was about to retreat. But right at this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly flashed across the field. A flying sword. The young man didn't even have time to react before his head flew into the air. Blood gushed out like a fountain. The eyes of the young man's severed head were wide open, filled with disbelief. After killing the young man, Yi Xian walked toward Sky Ascension City at the top of the mountain. No one obstructed him along the way, and he soon arrived at Sky Ascension City. It had to be said that Sky Ascension City was really tall. Standing at the top of the mountain was like standing in the starry sky. Yi Xian naturally didn't have the time to look at the starry sky. He walked to the city gate with his sword in hand. A middle-aged man stood there. In the hands of the middle-aged man was a silver spear. Yi Xian didn't know who this person was, and he didn't want to know either. Immediately, he rushed toward the middle-aged man with his sword in hand. The middle-aged man slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, the spear in his hand shot out like a bolt of lightning. This spear strike was like the galloping of a powerful army, and it carried along a monstrous momentum. It was precisely this momentum that forcefully forced Yi Xian to stop. However, along with the sword in Yi Xian's hand slashing down, this momentum was directly slashed into pieces. At the same time, Yi Xian charged forward swiftly, and he held his sword with both hands as he slashed down fiercely. The middle-aged man did not retreat. Instead, he raised his spear at an extremely crafty angle, directly striking Yi Xian's sword. However, dang! The silver spear in the middle-aged man's hands was instantly broken into two. Yi Xian stepped forward and slashed down with his sword. The middle-aged man didn't dare to take the attack head-on. With a light tap of his feet, he floated backward, distancing himself from Yi Xian. The moment he stopped, two flying swords silently slashed down. The middle-aged man's expression didn't change. Using his finger as a spear, he lightly swept it forward. Boom! Yi Xian's two flying swords were directly sent flying. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian in the distance, and finally, his gaze fell on the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Looking at this sword, his eyes were incomparably solemn. His spear was at the manifestation realm, but it was easily broken by this sword. What kind of sword was this? After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said softly, "With this sword, I am no match for him." After saying that, he turned around and disappeared. If he could fight, then fight. If he couldn't, then he absolutely wouldn't. Absolutely not. This wasn't because he didn't have a backbone, but because he had a clear understanding of his own strength. After the middle-aged man left, Yi Xian continued walking toward Sky Ascension City. Right at this moment, a woman appeared in front of him. She was extremely tall, and she was half a head taller than him. She wore a tight black dress, and a glass pearl floated in her palm. She gazed at Yi Xian, and she didn't waste her breath at all. The glass pearl suddenly flew out from her palm, and then the scene and the surroundings changed in an instant. The starry sky. At this moment, only Yi Xian and the woman remained here. Both of them were in an expansive starry sky, and the nearby Sky Ascension City had vanished as well. The woman in the black dress looked at Yi Xian. The glazed pearl in her hand started to spin rapidly. As it spun, the space in the field suddenly started to distort. At the same time, the power of countless stars converged towards Yi Xian, who was nearby. The energy of the stars. Endless star force was gathering from all directions. And its target was Yi Xian, who was not far away. Yi Xian's face was emotionless as he held the sword in his hand tightly. When the energy of the stars arrived above him, he suddenly leaped up and slashed down with his sword. Hiss! A sharp sound of something tearing resounded. At the same time, the energy of the stars in front of Yi Xian actually started to shatter inch by inch. It wasn't just the energy of the stars, even the starry sky here had started to shatter. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly clenched her fist, and then the energy of the stars surged down towards Yi Xian like tidewater. Rumble. The entire expanse of the starry sky started to tremble violently, and then it collapsed into pieces. Just like that, after about 15 minutes, Yi Xian and the woman in the black dress returned to the front of Ascending Heaven City. At this moment, Yi Xian had moved 300 m back while blood flowed incessantly from the corners of his mouth. On the other hand, the woman was still standing on the spot, but the glass pearl in her hand had shattered. Glancing at the sword in Yi Xian's hand, the woman in the black dress fell silent. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked towards the woman with the sword in his hand, and the sword in his hand was trembling violently. At this moment, Yi Xian's mind was clear because his bloodline had calmed down. At this moment, he felt like he could slash through anything as he held this sword. No matter what stood before him, so long as he held this sword, then he would definitely be able to slash it into pieces. Yi Xian stroked the blade of the sword lightly with his left hand, and he spoke softly, "What's your name?" "OM." A sword howl resounded. In the next moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly flew out and swung swiftly before him. In the next moment, 2 words appeared on the ground: Heavenly Retribution. Heavenly Retribution. Yi Xian said softly, "What a good heavenly retribution. Today, if anyone tries to stop me, I'll kill them. If the heavens try to stop me, I'll punish the heavens." As his voice fell, he leaped up and slashed down at the woman in the distance. Chi. In front of the heavenly retribution sword, space was weaker than paper. In front of Yi Xian, the woman in the black dress looked coldly at Yi Xian. With a flick of her sleeve, a black light shot towards Yi Xian like a sharp arrow. Yi Xian didn't dodge, and instead slashed down with his sword. Chi. The black light was instantly split into 2. However, at this moment, the woman in the black dress suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, an afterimage swept in front of Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could react, a palm had already pressed against his abdomen. Yi Xian's entire body was about to be sent flying. However, at this critical moment, his left hand suddenly grabbed the woman's palm, and his right hand wielded the sword and slashed at the back of the woman's neck. However, the woman in the black dress was even faster. The moment Yi Xian drew his sword, her right hand suddenly punched at Yi Xian's temple. If the punch landed, Yi Xian's head would definitely explode. Yi Xian's left hand had no choice but to release the woman's palm, and he moved to the side to block. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body was directly blasted away, but a deep wound appeared on the woman's cheek. Blood slowly flowed along the wound, and in an instant, half of the woman's face was covered in blood. The woman in the black dress looked at Yi Xian with a calm expression, as if she wasn't affected by the wound on her face at all. On the opposite side, Yi Xian held his sword and walked towards the woman in the black dress again. At this moment, the woman in the black dress turned around and disappeared. Just like the middle-aged man from before, if Yi Xian didn't have this sword, the two of them were confident that they could kill Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian had this sword, and they couldn't do anything about it. Yi Xian continued walking towards Sky Ascension City. In the void, the Star Lord looked at Yi Xian calmly, and no one knew what he was thinking. Not far from him, the Tang clan's patriarch, Tang Yan, glanced at Yi Xian. It had to be said that he felt slightly fortunate at this moment. He felt fortunate that he listened to Tang Qing and didn't target Yi Xian to death. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the Order Alliance that suffered losses today, but the Tang clan. Below, Yi Xian walked to the front of Sky Ascension City, and in the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward with his sword. Hiss! A ray of light flashed. Right when Yi Xian's ray of sword qi was about to strike the city gate, an old man suddenly appeared before the city gate, and then he waved his right hand, causing the ray of sword qi to be obliterated. Tang Yan suddenly shook his head and smiled when he saw the old man. Old freak you, your Order Alliance is really afraid of being laughed at by the world. You actually sent an old freak from 1,000 years ago. Old freak you. An expert from 1,000 years ago. He was an expert on the Dao rankings 1,000 years ago. Even though his ranking wasn't as high as Wang Jitsa's, he'd lived for a long time. Besides the Star Lord, Old Freak Yu was one of the few people from the Order Alliance who'd lived for a long time. As for his strength, it was unfathomable. If such a person came to deal with Yi Xian, it would be obvious that he was bullying the weak. Old Freak Yu gazed at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. However, Yi Xian still had no intention of stopping. The sword in his hand flickered with light as if it wanted to pierce through the sky. When Yi Xian arrived in front of Old Freak Yu, the latter suddenly stomped his right foot, and in the next moment, the space in front of Yi Xian started to crack inch by inch. Meanwhile, Old Freak Yu suddenly vanished, and in the next moment, a powerful force suddenly smashed towards Yi Xian who was nearby. Yi Xian charged forward swiftly and slashed with his sword with both hands. Bang! The powerful force was instantly slashed into pieces by Yi Xian's sword strike. However, Yi Xian himself was instantly blasted backwards. He flew for an entire 300 m, and he'd just stopped when an afterimage flashed by. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly slashed to the right. As his sword descended, it seemed like he'd slashed through something, but at the same time, a powerful force blasted against his stomach. Pooh! A mouthful of blood sprayed from Yi Xian's mouth, and then he was blasted back once more. Besides Old Freak Yu, there were two other people in front of Yi Xian. One wore a white robe, and the other wore a black robe. Seeing the two of them, Tang Yan's expression darkened. The black and white supremes of the Order Alliance. Tang Yan looked at the Star Lord, and the latter spoke indifferently. Did I say that I wanted to fight him one-on-one? Tang Yan didn't speak. One-on-one? If it was him, he wouldn't choose one-on-one either. With that sword in hand, Yi Xian's strength was not something that an average person could fight against. After Yi Xian was blasted away, Old Freak Yu and the other two charged at Yi Xian. Obviously, they didn't want to give Yi Xian any chance to catch his breath. In the distance, Yi Xian was about to attack when the Emperor Hound suddenly appeared in front of him. The Emperor Hound glanced at the three charging over, and then it looked at Yi Xian and chuckled. Do you want to know how strong I am now? Just as it finished speaking, a strong force suddenly crashed into its body. Bang! The Emperor Hound was instantly blasted away, and then it crashed heavily to the ground. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 586. Senior Yu and the others paid no attention to the Emperor Hound that had crashed to the ground, and they charged at Yi Xian instead. Their objective was to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian held his sword tightly while two types of sword intent surged madly from within him. Fight! He'd only come here with a single objective, and it was either one of them die. He couldn't defeat them. He didn't think too much about it. In any case, even if he couldn't defeat them, they would still attack him. Right when Yi Xian was about to attack, the nearby emperor hounds suddenly roared, and then a powerful strand of beast pressure suddenly swept through the surroundings. Rumble. Senior Yu and the others immediately stopped, and then they turned around to look at the emperor hound. Yi Xian looked at the emperor hound as well. At this moment, the emperor hound had a ferocious expression on its face, and its entire body was growing explosively. In next to no time, its body was at least 10 times larger than before. Presently, the emperor hound was the size of a small hill. Moreover, there were even 2 fangs that were over 3 m long in its mouth. Those fangs were white as snow, and they emanated a ghastly cold glow that caused others to shudder with fear. Besides that, there was a pair of black wings on the emperor hound's back. It had transformed. Yi Xian had heard the emperor hound say that it could transform. So, it seemed like the emperor hound had transformed right now. But he didn't know how strong it was. After it transformed, the emperor hound suddenly roared into the sky, and then the sky instantly dimmed down. The emperor hound. A trace of seriousness finally appeared in the eyes of the Star Lord who stood in midair. The emperor hound. That's the legendary guardian beast of the God clan. Why is it with Yi Xian? The Star Lord's brows gradually knit together. The emperor hound suddenly charged towards Senior Yu and the others, and it was so swift that it caused their expressions to instantly change drastically. It was too swift. Senior Yu, who led the group, could only instinctively block with his hands. Bang! Everyone watched as Senior Yu was blasted over 1 kilometer away, and his arms were instantly shattered as soon as he stopped. The expressions of the other 2 experts from the Order Alliance instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. The emperor hound walked towards Old Yu. With every step it took, the ground would shake violently. And around its body, a powerful pressure kept surging towards Old Yu. Elder Yu stared fixedly at the emperor dog. At this moment, his arms were no longer there. At this moment, the other 2 powerhouses directly blocked in front of Old Yu, and one of them said, "Old Yu, retreat for now and recuperate." Old Yu did not say any nonsense as he turned around and disappeared. The emperor hound looked at the 2 people in front of it. Its expression was ferocious and its eyes were filled with a strong murderous intent. Without another word, the emperor hound charged at the 2 of them. Yi Xian was about to attack the moment the emperor hound charged over. However, the middle-aged man and the black-dressed woman who had stopped him earlier suddenly appeared in front of him. Apart from that, there were 10 Dao verification experts around him. 12 super experts. In the void, Tang Yen frowned. It was obvious that the Order Alliance wanted to kill Yi Xian. There was only one reason for sending out so many experts, and that was to not give Yi Xian any chance. 12 super experts. Under such a lineup, it was impossible for Yi Xian to stop them at all. In the void, Tang Yen looked at Yi Xian silently. He had no intention of attacking. The Tang clan's goal was to exhaust the Order Alliance, not to truly fight the Order Alliance to the death. Because a decisive battle wouldn't benefit the Tang clan at all. Not only that, but the Tang clan's ultimate goal was the treasure. Below, the 12 experts did not waste any time and charged directly at Yi Xian. As he watched the 12 people charge at him, Yi Xian stabbed his sword into the ground before him, and then he slowly closed his eyes. 12 experts who had surpassed the Dao verification realm. Such a lineup wasn't something he could resist at all. But now, he had no one to rely on. He could only rely on himself. In the sky, the Star-Lord stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Does Yi Xian still have a trump card? He wasn't confident. Tang Yen also looked at Yi Xian below. If this Yi Xian didn't have a trump card, then only death awaits him. Under everyone's gaze, an illusory Shao Ta suddenly appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows. When this illusory Shao Ta appeared, the Star-Lord's expression instantly changed. Retreat. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to attack, but Tang Yen directly blocked in front of him. The Star-Lord roared angrily, "Scram!" As soon as he finished speaking, he directly attacked. But Tang Yen didn't retreat. Soon, the 2 of them started fighting. Below, when the illusory Xiao Ta appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows, his body began to tremble violently. However, an invisible pressure suddenly enveloped the 12 super experts. When they were enveloped by this pressure, the 12 people's expressions instantly changed. The middle-aged man in the lead and the black-dressed woman reacted the fastest. The two of them immediately fled. As for the remaining 10 people, just as they were about to flee, a blood-red punishment word suddenly appeared above their heads. The next moment, the 10 people directly disappeared. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression suddenly distorted. Not only that, his body actually began to crack, and blood continuously flowed out from his 7 orifices. It was incomparably shocking. He couldn't bear it. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly roared, "Emperor Hound! Quickly King run!" In the distance, the Emperor Hound that was fighting was stunned. In the next moment, it turned around and ran. At this moment, Yi Xian roared again, "Mother Ker, why don't you take me with you and run?" The Emperor Hound was stunned, and then it turned around and flew over to Yi Xian. In the next moment, Yi Xian flew onto its back, and the Emperor Hound was about to fly away with Yi Xian. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man and the black-dressed woman from before appeared in front of Yi Xian once more. But right at this moment, the illusory Xiao Ta appeared between Yi Xian's eyebrows once more. Their expressions instantly changed, and they retreated explosively. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound had vanished into the horizon. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's voice resounded from the horizon, "I was just trying to scare you." Ha! The two of them were speechless. In the sky, the Star Lord and Tang Yen had stopped as well. At this moment, the Star Lord's expression was extremely gloomy. 10 super experts. His heart was bleeding. This was secondary. This time, the Order Alliance had lost over 40 Dao Realm experts. Moreover, even he couldn't imagine that all of them had died at the hands of Yi Xian. Moreover, Yi Xian was just a sword saint. This time, they could be said to have suffered heavy losses, and it could even be said to be a serious injury. The Star Lord gazed at Tang Yen. The latter didn't say anything, and he just turned around and vanished. The Star Lord's expression gradually calmed down. What a Tang clan! What a Yi Xian! As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. At the end of the horizon, the Emperor Hound was dashing madly with Yi Xian on its back. At this moment, the Emperor Hound's speed was extremely swift when it had changed its voice. It didn't take long for the Emperor Hound to bring Yi Xian to the overflowing sky ocean, and it descended on a small island. Yi Xian rolled off its back as soon as he landed on the ground. Blood gushed out of his eyes, nose, mouth, and mouth like a fountain. Not only that, but his body was shaking violently as if he was having a cramp. The Emperor Hound's face fell when it witnessed this scene. It knew that Yi Xian had suffered backlash. Moreover, it was an extremely severe backlash. It had no other choice now, and it could only hope that Yi Xian would be able to endure it. Within the pagoda. After the 10 of them were taken into the pagoda, they were slightly dazed. Meanwhile, a woman appeared in front of them. It was you. You glanced at them and shook her head, too weak. As soon as she finished speaking, their bodies actually started to gradually become illusory. They were horrified when they sensed this, and they wanted to resist. However, they noticed to their astonishment that it was useless no matter how they resisted. Despair. At this moment, there was only despair in their hearts. Just like that, it didn't take long for them to vanish from the pagoda. You left the pagoda and arrived before Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Shaoling, suddenly carried a huge pile of spirit fruits over to Yi Xian, and she placed the spirit fruits with the most abundant spirit energy into Yi Xian's mouth. However, Yi Xian didn't even have the strength to eat them. Shaoling, started crying when she saw this, and she hurriedly said, "Don't eat them. Eat them quickly. You'll be fine once you eat them." However, Yi Xian still didn't speak. Moreover, his aura was growing weaker and weaker. You gazed at Xiaoling, you care about him a lot. Xiaoling, raised her head to look at you while tears flowed incessantly from her eyes. Big brother is a good person. Wu. A good person? You shook his head slightly. He doesn't seem like a good person. Xiaoling, paid no attention to you. She hurriedly crushed the spirit fruits, pinched Yi Xian's mouth, and poured the juice from the spirit fruits into Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian swallowed the juice, but it was useless. Xiaoling, grew even more anxious when she witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, Yu sized Yi Xian up, and then he said softly, he first utilized the dragon's soul and dragon energy, and then he activated his bloodline. After that, he utilized that lethal sword. All of that is already too much for his body to bear, yet he actually utilized the pagoda in the end. He's practically hopeless. Hopeless. The Emperor Hound frowned. There's no hope at all? Yu fell silent for a moment before he said, there's a chance, but... Xiaoling, suddenly gazed at Yu, what hope? Yu glanced at Xiaoling, your quintessence is rather special. If he devours it, then there's still hope. Devour quintessence? Xiaoling, was stunned, and then she said with excitement, really? Yu spoke solemnly, little fellow, do you know that if he devours you, then you might vanish? Do you understand what I mean? Vanish? Xiaoling, blinked, does that mean I'll die? Yu nodded. Xiaoling, clenched her fists tightly, and then she suddenly started crying, I don't want to die. I still want to plant spirit fruits, I still want to play, I don't want to die. As she spoke, she suddenly sat down by Yi Xian's side, and then she placed her right hand between Yi Xian's brows. In the next moment, countless strands of quintessence energy surged towards Yi Xian. Xiaoling, ceaselessly wiped away the tears on her face with her left hand, but the tears just wouldn't stop. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I still have many spirit trees to plant. Woo. Even though she said that, she didn't stop pouring quintessence energy into Yi Xian. At the same time, her voice grew softer, her face paler, and her aura grew weaker. Most importantly, her body grew more and more ethereal. Chapter 587. Right when Xiaoling, was about to vanish completely, Yi Xian suddenly sat up from the ground, and he hurriedly pushed Xiaoling's hand away. In an instant, Xiaoling, fell into his arms, and her body became illusory as if she was about to vanish. Yi Xian was horrified when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly looked at Yu. At this moment, his eyes and face were filled with terror. When he was in the Order Alliance, he wasn't afraid at all even when he faced death. But at this moment, he was afraid. He was afraid of losing this little girl. Yu glanced at Xiaoling, who'd closed her eyes, and he shook his head. Yi Xian hurriedly sent the quintessence energy he'd just absorbed to Xiaoling. Meanwhile, Yu spoke abruptly, both of you might die if you do that. Yi Xian paid no attention to Yu, and the quintessence energy within him surged madly towards Xiaoling. As for himself, his face instantly turned extremely pale, and it was extremely terrifying. The Emperor Dog hesitated to speak, and in the end, it only sighed lightly. Suddenly, Yu said, there's another way to save her. Yi Xian suddenly looked up at Yu, and the latter spoke solemnly, absorb the quintessence of this world. I'm not talking about ordinary quintessence energy, I'm talking about the quintessence of this world's tendo. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, how do I absorb it? Yu gazed at Yi Xian, do you know what tendo is? Yi Xian stared fixedly at Yu, how do I absorb it? Yu shook his head, if you forcefully absorb the quintessence of this world's tendo, you'll be suppressed by tendo. It isn't an ordinary expert, and you're no match for it right now. Yi Xian roared furiously, but I want to give it a try. At this moment, he couldn't control his emotions anymore. Because he was really panicking. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid that his family and friends would die. Yu glanced at Yi Xian and said, if you forcibly absorb the power of origin now, you will suffer the divine punishment of Tendo. You don't have the ability to resist the divine punishment. Even if it's me, I wouldn't dare. Oh no, I wouldn't even dare to face it head-on. Do you understand? Yi Xian was in pain. Miss Ayu, I beg you, please don't waste time, okay? If there's anything, I'll take responsibility. I beg of you. You looked at Yi Xian for a moment. In the end, she waved her right hand slightly. In an instant, the space was torn apart. Then wisps of dark purple origin purple gas appeared in the air. An extremely pure origin purple qi. Yi Xian made a grabbing motion in the air with his right hand. Soon, the original source purple gas surged toward him and Xiao Linger. As soon as Xiao Linger absorbed the origin purple qi, her body instantly started to solidify, even though it was very slow. Yi Xian's expression instantly eased up when he witnessed this scene. However, right at this moment, a shapeless pressure suddenly appeared in the horizon. The pressure of heaven and earth. Yi Xian looked up. Dark clouds had suddenly gathered in the sky, and within the thick layer of clouds, bolts of blood-red lightning danced like red snakes. Divine punishment. The Emperor Hound's expression instantly became solemn when it saw the blood-red lightning bolts. Even the heavenly punishment of a Tao-proving realm expert isn't this powerful, right? You sneered, that's heavenly punishment. This is divine punishment. Do you know what that means? When an ordinary person breaks through, the Tendo will send down heavenly punishment. Actually, it's like turning a blind eye to it. After all, it doesn't dare to go too far. Since ancient times until now, there had been many people who defied the heavens and slaughtered Daos. If all the experts of this world gathered together, it wouldn't be difficult for them to overturn it. Therefore, the heavenly punishment isn't very powerful. It's just a symbolic test. If you pass, it's strength. If you don't, it's fate. However, this divine punishment means that it wants you to die. The Emperor Hound did not understand, why? You said calmly, the origin of a world is where the lifeline of the Tendo lies. It allows people to absorb the origin, but only ordinary origin qi. The origin of the Tendo is its core. Apart from those top experts, such as the Star Lord, no one else can absorb it. It's possible to absorb it forcefully using other methods, but you have to endure the divine punishment first. In any case, I can't endure it. Yes, I can't endure it for now. Do you understand? The Emperor Hound, at this moment, more than 10 powerful auras suddenly appeared in the surroundings. The one leading them was Master Ku from the Order Alliance. In the void, the Star Lord and Tang Yen appeared again. The Star Lord looked down at Yi Xian. Prying into the origin of the Tendo, haha. Not far away, Tang Yen frowned slightly. What was Yi Xian doing? Prying into the origin of the Tendo would cause one to be targeted by the Tendo. What was the Tendo? It was the spirit of the universe. Although they could also obtain the origin of the Tendo, that was an agreement with the Tendo. They could only obtain a certain amount every year and could not forcibly obtain it. Defying the heavens? Just treat it as a joke. Those who had not come into contact with the Tendo would never know how terrifying it was. However, Yi Xian dared to forcibly take the origin of the Tendo. He would definitely suffer the divine punishment of the Tendo. If he could not endure it, he would die. Endure it? That would be even worse. It had been many years since someone had defied the heavens. The surrounding experts of the Order Alliance did not make a move. They just watched quietly. They were not anxious at all. Because Yi Xian was fighting against the Tendo, they only needed to watch the show. Not far away, a woman quietly appeared. It was none other than Zhao Mu. Zhao Mu glanced at the sky and frowned slightly. In the next moment, she looked down at Yi Xian, and no one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, Yi Xian stood up. At this moment, he was still so weak, but he'd stood up in the end. He had to endure the divine punishment. He had to face everything by himself. Ah, you spoke abruptly, I can't help you resist the divine punishment. I'm not a Tao law of this world. If I help, the divine punishment will be at least 100 times stronger, and it might even cause the Tendo to appear. Yi Xian nodded. Miss you just protect Shaoling, for me, alright? You glanced at Shaoling, Shaoling, was still absorbing the Tendo's origin, and Shaoling, condition had clearly improved. You nodded, alright. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. You really didn't raise her to eat her? In the beginning, she'd thought that Yi Xian had raised this little fellow in preparation to devour her one day. Devouring an origin was infinitely beneficial. Yi Xian glanced at Shaoling, and spoke softly, you must get better. When the time comes, I'll drive the 6th floor away and plant trees for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the sky. In the sky, the pressure locked onto Yi Xian with precision. Yi Xian looked up and spoke softly, just lend me some origin energy. I'll return it to you in the future. Everyone was speechless. Crack. At this moment, a blood-red bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky. The negotiations had broken down. As he watched the blood-red bolt of lightning descend, Yi Xian gripped the sword in his hand tightly and shot into the sky. During this process, blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. As everyone watched, Yi Xian's sword slashed at the bolt of lightning. Boom! The blood-red bolt of lightning was shattered by Yi Xian's sword, but at the same time, Yi Xian fell from the sky and smashed heavily onto the ground. Puff! As soon as he landed, Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. At this moment, lightning flickered in the black clouds in the sky, and soon, another blood-red bolt of lightning descended. Nearby, the Emperor Hound was about to attack, but Yu shook his head. If you attack, the divine punishment will double, and its power will double. The situation will only worsen. The Emperor Hound frowned when it heard this. Nearby, Yi Xian stood up, and his hand holding the sword was trembling. Yi Xian looked up at the bolt of lightning, and in the next moment, he stomped his right foot. Buzz! The cry of a sword resounded through the sky, and then a blood-red sword light slashed at the bolt of lightning. Boom! The blood-red bolt of lightning was instantly shattered by the sword light. However, Yi Xian smashed onto the ground again, and this time, he smashed a huge crater into the ground. In the crater, Yi Xian vomited blood incessantly. Not only that, but his entire body had also split open, and his internal organs had also ruptured. However, the blood-red lightning in the sky was still there, and the pressure was growing stronger. The Emperor Hound's face darkened when it saw this. If this went on, Yi Xian would definitely die. At this moment, Yi Xian stood up again, but this time, he could not even stand stably. Yi Xian looked up at the sky, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and grinned. Continue. As soon as he spoke, he stomped his right foot lightly, and his entire body transformed into a sword light that shot into the sky. In the sky, another bolt of lightning was directly shattered by Yi Xian's sword light, but he himself smashed onto the ground again. In the void, the Star-Lord looked coldly at Yi Xian. To be more precise, he was looking at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. The reason why Yi Xian, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight, was able to withstand so many bolts of divine lightning was actually because of this sword. Even the divine lightning couldn't withstand this sword. What sword is this? At this moment, the sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly broke free from Yi Xian's hand, and it slashed straight into the sky. Everywhere it passed, space was directly torn apart. Streaks of blood-red lightning suddenly struck down from the black clouds. Rumble, rumble. A series of explosions resounded in the sky, and countless bolts of lightning were shattered. Everyone watched as the sword sliced through all the blood-red divine lightning, and in the end, entered the black clouds. Rumble. The entire black cloud layer instantly shattered. Seeing this scene, the Star-Lord frowned, but at this moment, a face formed by clouds suddenly appeared in the sky. The next moment, boom! That sword directly fell from the sky. Seeing this face formed by clouds, the expressions of the Star-Lord and Tang Yen in the dark instantly changed. The two of them quietly bowed slightly to this face. Even they had to maintain respect for the Tendo. In the sky, that face looked down, and the next moment, a three-colored divine lightning suddenly fell from the sky. The three-colored divine lightning contained 3 types of Tao laws, 3 types of Tao laws of the four-dimensional universe. Seeing this scene, the Star-Lord and Tang Yan's expressions instantly changed. This kind of divine lightning. Even they might not be able to withstand it. One should know that when they first broke through, only 2-colored divine lightning fell. But now, it was 3-colored. Obviously, this Tendo was enraged by that sword. Below, you suddenly said in a deep voice, unstoppable. The 3-colored divine lightning fell, and heaven and earth trembled. Yi Xian looked at the descending 9-colored divine lightning. At this moment, he knew that he was going to die. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Chapter 588. White Little Fellow. In the void, the Star-Lord looked at the white little fellow and frowned. What is this thing? Tang Yan's eyes were also filled with doubt. What was this thing? Below, the Emperor Hound and you were also looking at the white little fellow. The little fellow's body was illusory. Obviously, this was not her real body. Under everyone's gaze, the white little fellow rubbed her eyes as if she had just woken up. Suddenly, she raised her head to look at the sky. In the sky, the 3-colored divine lightning had already arrived above her head. The powerful divine lightning caused the entire sky to turn illusory. Looking at the 3-colored divine lightning, the little fellow blinked. In the next moment, she shivered all over and turned to run. Run? Everyone was petrified. Just like that? The Emperor Hound and Yu's expressions froze. In the void, the Star-Lord and Tang Yen were also somewhat stunned. Just like that? In the distance, the white little fellow suddenly stopped running. She blinked her eyes. Why did she have to run? Why did she have to run? The little fellow looked at her claws. Then, under everyone's gaze, she threw the candied hawthorn in her hand towards the 3-colored divine lightning in the sky. A candied hawthorn condensed from a special kind of spiritual energy flashed across the battlefield. In the next moment, boom! In front of everyone's eyes, the 3-colored godly thunder disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Everyone, in the sky, the white little fellow grinned and waved her claws at the illusory face in the sky, as if greeting it. She usually did not fight. Fighting was usually done by others. For example, a certain young lady, at this moment, in the void, another divine lightning appeared. This time, it was 4-colored divine lightning. 4-colored divine lightning that contained 4 kinds of Tao laws. As the 4-colored divine lightning appeared, the surrounding space directly became illusory. The surrounding space could not withstand the power of the 4-colored divine lightning at all. Looking at the 4-colored divine lightning, the white little fellow blinked. Again? Wasn't it just for fun? Soon, the little guy became angry. She opened her little paw and a candied haw appeared in it. Just as she was about to throw it out, she suddenly looked at the candied haw and blinked. She stuck out her little tongue and licked it. It was so sweet, so she licked it again. So comfortable. White little guy was obviously very happy, his eyes squinted and his face was full of smiles. At this moment, she had already forgotten that she was angry just now. All around, everyone was looking at the little white fellow licking the candied haws. In front of the divine thunder of Tendo, he still dared to eat Tanghulu. Below, you looked at the little white fellow licking the candied haws, and could not help but ask the Emperor Hound beside him, is it really that delicious? Emperor Dog, at this time, the 4-colored lightning bolt had already descended. However, the white little fellow did not dodge or evade, allowing the lightning bolt to land on her. When the 4-colored godly lightning landed on the little fellow, everyone was petrified. That was because the white little fellow was still there, but the four-colored godly lightning had disappeared. Was it absorbed? In the void, the Star Lord's expression turned solemn. Tang Yen was the same. Absorbed the four-colored godly lightning? How was that possible? In the sky, the white little fellow's body suddenly trembled. Soon, she let out a heavy breath, and a few lightning bolts flashed out of her mouth. In the void, the face looked down at the white little fellow below. This time, it did not attack again. Because things had become a little complicated. And at this time, the white little fellow looked up at the face, and in the next moment, she opened her mouth and sucked. In an instant, the face trembled violently, and then became illusory. The face's expression instantly changed, and it frantically retreated, directly retreating into the starry sky. In the starry sky, the face looked at the white little fellow below in horror, because just now, the little fellow had directly sucked away 1/3 of its origin chi. 1/3. What kind of concept was that? It could not be provoked. The face turned around and disappeared, leaving without the slightest hesitation. Seeing that the face had escaped, in the void, the Star Lord and Tang Yen looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. At this moment, the shock in their hearts could not be any greater. That face just now was not the Tendo's original body, but it was definitely the Tendo's clone. However, this little fellow actually made the Tendo clone run away? What kind of monster was this? In the sky, the white little fellow blinked her eyes. It ran away just like that? Actually, she still wanted to suck. At this moment, she seemed to have thought of something, and she turned around and flew in front of Xiaolinger. Just like that, the two little fellows looked at each other. At this time, the white little fellow handed a candied fruit to Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger took the candied fruit, and then she pointed at the half-dead Yi Xian on the ground not far away. The white little fellow glanced at Yi Xian, and suddenly, she looked at the executing heaven sword in Yi Xian's hand. Seeing the executing heaven sword, she instantly flew into a rage. Under the shocked gazes of Yu and the Emperor Hound, she flew in front of Yi Xian and slapped the sword with her claws. The sword trembled violently, and let out a low whine that seemed to be somewhat painful. Just like that, the little white fellow beat up the sword for a full quarter of an hour. During this process, the arrogant sword did not dare to resist at all. It could only emit a low sword cry, as though it was begging for mercy. Yu and the Emperor Hound looked at each other. They did not know why the white little fellow beat the sword, nor did they dare to say, let alone ask. However, the executing heaven sword was indeed a bit miserable. It did not even dare to escape, and could only let the white little fellow beat it up. After a while, the white little fellow stopped. She glared at the sword again, and then quickly waved her little claws. Who knew what she was talking about? No one knew. No one dared to ask. At this moment, the white little fellow grabbed the executing heaven sword and threw it aside, and then she looked at Yi Xian who was lying on the ground. She blinked, and then approached Yi Xian. After carefully sizing up Yi Xian, she pinched Yi Xian's ears with her little claws, and then gently pinched Yi Xian's nose and face with a trace of curiosity in her eyes. About 15 minutes later, the little fellow lightly tapped Yi Xian's stomach, and then listened attentively. Yu's face darkened. Is she listening to this fellow's pregnant? Emperor Hound, at this moment, the little fellow lightly waved her little claws at Yi Xian, and in an instant, a strand of violet energy directly surged into Yi Xian's body. In an instant, Yi Xian's injuries instantly healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this scene, Yu and Emperor Hound's expressions changed. In the void, opposite the Star Lord, Tang Yen smiled and said, Star Lord, if you don't act now, it will be too late. Act? The Star Lord glanced coldly at Tang Yen, and then turned to leave with the experts of the Order Alliance. Naturally, he wasn't stupid. Now that the little fellow was here, act? Did he want to die? Tang Yen glanced at Yi Xian below, and he knew that he had to reevaluate Yi Xian. Whether it was the Order Alliance or the Tang clan, they had to reevaluate Yi Xian. Soon, Tang Yen also left. Below, Yi Xian lay in a deep pit, but at this moment, her body was recovering at an astonishing speed. Not only her body, but even her soul was recovering. This speed of recovery shocked Emperor Hound and Yu. Gradually, Yi Xian's soul recovered, and at this moment, the white little fellow suddenly flew into the world prison pagoda. Within the pagoda, the white little fellow sized up the surroundings. In the end, she arrived at the top of the pagoda, and when she saw a sword, she grinned, and then she waved her claw as if she was greeting it. At the top of the pagoda, the sword trembled slightly in response. The white little fellow grinned, and then she turned around and left the world prison pagoda. She arrived in front of Xiaolinger, and then she waved her claw. A strand of pure violet energy suddenly surged into Xiaolinger's body. In an instant, Xiaolinger's body directly recovered to normal. Moreover, that strand of pure violet energy was even changing her physique. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, can you give me some? When he saw the white little fellow, he knew that this might be the greatest opportunity in his lifetime. He didn't know why he had such a feeling. All he knew was that at this moment, his face wasn't important anymore. He had to make a request. Xiao Bai looked at the Emperor Hound and blinked. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound took out a stick of Tanghulu and handed it to her. It was something that Xiaolinger had bought. It had casually taken one earlier, and now it was the perfect opportunity to present it to Xiaolinger. The white little fellow's eyes instantly lit up when she saw the Tanghulu. She took the Tanghulu and lightly licked it. Her round little face was filled with happiness. After a while, she suddenly looked at the Emperor Hound. She thought for a moment, and then she lightly waved her claw at the Emperor Hound. In an instant, a strand of pure violet energy surged directly into the Emperor Hound's body. The Emperor Hound's body trembled, and at the same time, its blood actually started to slowly boil. The Emperor Hound was overjoyed, and it hurriedly looked at the white little fellow and said excitedly, "Thank you." As soon as it finished speaking, it turned around and returned to the world prison pagoda. At this moment, the little white fellow suddenly waved its little claw. In the faraway divine martial city, somewhere underground in the sword sect, a little black box suddenly shot up into the sky. In the next moment, the little box directly appeared in front of her. The white little fellow passed the box to Xiaolinger, and then she grinned, and then her body gradually became illusory. Xiaolinger hurriedly said, "Are you leaving?" The white little fellow nodded, and in her claw was still holding a Tanghulu. Xiaolinger looked at the white little fellow and asked, "Will you appear again?" The white little fellow waved her claw quickly, as if she was expressing something. Gradually, the white little fellow disappeared, and only the Tanghulu was left in the air. Seeing the white little fellow disappear, Xiaolinger's expression dimmed, and she was somewhat disappointed. At this time, Yu asked, "What did she say just now?" Xiaolinger looked at Yu and said softly, "She said she was in a very, very far place, very far." Yu raised his head and looked at the end of the horizon. The vast universe was truly vast. Even this four-dimensional universe was boundless. And the funny thing was, many people didn't even understand the fourth dimension, yet they wanted to understand the fifth dimension. Ridiculous, and even more tragic. Yu collected his thoughts, and then looked at Yi Xian on the ground. At this time, Yi Xian's injuries had already recovered by 70% to 80%. Yi Xian stood up and looked at Xiaolinger. Xiaolinger, that little fellow just now was. Xiaolinger lowered her head slightly. "My friend." "Friend." Yi Xian smiled and didn't ask any more. He walked to Xiaolinger and said softly, "How is your body now?" Before Xiaolinger could answer, Yu suddenly said, "Her body now is even better than when she was at her peak." Yi Xian looked at Yu, and Yu said softly, "If I gave her a Tanghulu just now, I'm afraid my body could also recover." At this point, she suddenly took out a mirror and looked at the person in the mirror. She was expressionless. "You're so stupid." As soon as she said that, the mirror suddenly shattered. Yi Xian. Chapter 589. Regret. At this moment, Yu still felt some regret. Because she had underestimated the little white fellow's ability. In her opinion, her injuries could only be healed over time. However, when she saw Yi Xian and Xiao Ling fully recover, she knew she was wrong. The little white fellow could definitely help her recover to her peak quickly. And the price was just a stick of candied fruit. A stick of candied fruit. At this moment, Yu's heart was in a mess. Just a stick of candied fruit, and the little white fellow had given the emperor hound so much, she felt it was unfair. The more she thought about it, the more she felt it was unfair. With a cold snort, she turned and returned to the prison pagoda. He continued his seclusion. Xiao Ling also returned to the prison pagoda. She placed the box that the little white fellow had given her under a tree. She did not open it, and no one knew why she did not open it. Outside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian looked at the executing heaven sword in front of him. He had to admit that this sword's lethality was truly powerful. Extremely powerful. From the beginning until now, apart from that face, there was nothing that could block his sword. With this sword, he was practically invincible in close combat. And the soul-suppressing sword was suitable for long-range attacks. It could be used to split souls. One far and one near. Yi Xian collected his thoughts. He put away the executing heaven's sword and disappeared on the spot. Not far away, a woman stood quietly. This person was Zhao Mu. She did not make a move. A moment later, Zhao Mu turned and left. What Yi Xian had done in Sky Ascension City quickly spread throughout the northern wasteland domain. At this moment, in the several wastelands of the chaotic universe, except for the Divine Kingdom, Yi Xian's reputation had reached its peak. Yi Xian. He had killed dozens of Dao Realm cultivators from the Order Alliance. The dozens of Dao Realm cultivators were not the main point. The main point was that Yi Xian had killed people from the Order Alliance. In the current world, the Order Alliance was still the nominal leader. And this Yi Xian dared to challenge the Order Alliance. It could be said that among the younger generation, Yi Xian's reputation was like the midday sun, directly surpassing anyone on the law rank. Tang Clan. In the Hall of Heroes, all the elders and experts of the Tang Clan were present. The atmosphere in the hall was rather solemn. This time, the matter between Yi Xian and the Order Alliance also shocked them. In particular, even the Tang Clan would not have the nerve to underestimate Yi Xian's strength and trump cards. At this time, Tang Yen suddenly looked at Tang Qing, Tang Yi, and Tang Feng. "Do you have anything to say?" Tang Feng said solemnly, "Reevaluate this person." Tang Yi nodded, "If we want to take that treasure, this is the best time for us to act, because right now, both the Holy Martial City and the Sword Sect are at their weakest. Of course, if we act now, we will also be in danger, because Yi Xian is." Then, he shook his head and looked at Tang Qing. "What do you think, big sis?" Everyone gazed at Tang Qing. It could be said that Tang Qing's status in the Tang clan had risen greatly. It was exactly because of Tang Qing's suggestion that the Tang clan hadn't acted against Yi Xian. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the Order Alliance that would suffer heavy losses this time, it would be the Tang clan. All of them had underestimated Yi Xian. Tang Qing fell silent for a moment before he said, "Patriarch, elders, I think that we shouldn't focus on obtaining that treasure right now. We should study Yi Xian, the person behind him, and that treasure." Above, Tang Yen said, "Continue." Tang Qing nodded, "Yi Xian is still a mystery. Where are his limits? Is there anyone else behind him? Is it just one person or many? Those precious treasures of his and that imperial hound of the Shin clan. All of that shows that he isn't a simple person. Furthermore, the fact that he was able to touch that treasure proves that he already controls it. That treasure killed 30 Dao Realm experts in the blink of an eye. Instantly killed 30 Dao Realm experts." The expressions of everyone here became extremely solemn when they heard this. They were aware of what had happened in Sky Ascension City, and they were shocked that Yi Xian was able to utilize that treasure. Actually, it should be said that they feared it. At this moment, even the Tang clan didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian at all. Meanwhile, Tang Qing continued, besides that, we can't overlook something, and it's that the demon race has some old geezers. Especially the demon race, they haven't taken any action until now. I would definitely not believe it if they said that they didn't have any thoughts. Since they haven't taken any action at all, then there are only two explanations. Firstly, they're afraid of something and don't dare to act against us. Secondly, they're acting like we were, and they're responding to changes in the outside world by remaining calm. Regardless of what the reason is, we can't act right now. Otherwise, the Order Alliance might be a good example to us. Tang Feng nodded slightly. Big sister is right. The important matter at hand is for our Tang clan to figure out who Yi Xian and the person behind him are. Only by truly figuring out our opponent's strength would we be able to minimize our losses. Right at this moment, Tang Qing spoke abruptly. Why must we become his opponent? Everyone gazed at Tang Qing upon hearing this. Tang Qing smiled. Can't we make use of him? Presently, his relationship with the Order Alliance is definitely like fire and water, and the Order Alliance will absolutely not dare to allow him to grow. So, here's the problem. Since the Order Alliance doesn't dare to allow him to grow, they'll definitely continue targeting Yi Xian, and Yi Xian will definitely resist. So, this matter might just be the beginning and not the end. Tang Yi spoke softly. Big sister, you mean that we should continue to watch from the sidelines? Tang Qing nodded. We can even help Yi Xian when it's necessary. Isn't it a good thing for our Tang clan if Yi Xian helps us exhaust the Order Alliance? Tang Yi smiled. But big sister, have you thought about it? If Yi Xian continues to grow, then not to mention the Order Alliance, even our Tang clan will probably be helpless against him. Tang Qing smiled. Then what do you think our Tang clan should do? Should we immediately send people to kill Yi Xian like the Order Alliance did? Moreover, even if we use all our strength, won't the Order Alliance stop us? As she spoke, she looked at Tang Yi. Second brother, you still don't seem to understand one thing. The current Yi Xian is no longer a person. He's even more terrifying than a force. Since he can use our Tang clan to restrain the Order Alliance, why can't he use the Order Alliance or the Monster Clan to restrain our Tang clan? At that time, I don't know about the Monster Clan, but the Order Alliance will definitely be more than happy to help him target our Tang clan. It's such a simple matter. Can't second brother understand? Hearing this, Tang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Tang Qing's words were a little harsh. What did one need to be the heir? Strength and talent. However, intelligence, or in other words, vision was needed. Tang Qing's words were undoubtedly saying that he didn't have a vision, that he didn't see deep enough, and that he didn't see far enough. This sentence was really very piercing. Tang Yi gazed at Tang Qing. Big sister, your words are too harsh. Are you targeting me? Tang Qing shook her head. I just want to tell you to look at the whole picture. It's beneficial to the clan. An old man nodded slightly. Qing is right. You really have to look at the whole picture. Otherwise, a single wrong decision might bring irreparable losses to our Tang clan. Tang Yi glanced at Tang Qing, and then he smiled. You're right, big sister. I've learned something. Tang Qing's face remained expressionless, and no one knew what she was thinking. Suddenly, Tang Yan said, just as Qing said, our Tang clan won't act against Yi Xian from now onward, and we'll use all our strength to investigate him. Besides that, Tang Qing has been promoted to an elder from now onward. Besides being able to establish her own estate, she can even represent our Tang clan to recruit all sorts of monstrous geniuses and experts. Besides the Grand Elder and me, she doesn't have to explain her actions to anyone. At the same time, she can mobilize at least 50 Tang clan cavalrymen. The expressions of everyone here changed when they heard this. If it was said that Tang Qing only had a little power before, then now, Tang Qing's power was huge. It could be said that besides the Grand Elder and Tang Yan, no one else could control Tang Qing. Moreover, she could mobilize 50 Tang clan cavalrymen. After all, Tang Yi and Tang Feng were only able to mobilize 30. Now, Tang Qing could be said to have completely surpassed them in terms of authority. Tang Yi gazed at Tang Qing and smiled. Congratulations, big sister. Tang Feng grinned as well. Congratulations, big sister. Tang Qing bowed slightly to Tang Yen. Thank you, patriarch. Tang Yen nodded and said, there's something strange about the Qin clan. There might be someone standing behind them, but I don't know who it is for now. All of you should take extra precautions against the Qin clan. All of them nodded. Tang Yen turned around, and the others dispersed. At the entrance to the hall, Tang Yi suddenly walked over to Tang Qing's side. Big sister is helping Yi Xian. Tang Qing remained silent. Tang Yi smiled and said, I can tell, but can't the patriarch and the elders? Tang Qing gazed at Tang Yi, second brother. In terms of fighting, besides the patriarch and seventh brother, no one in the Tang clan can defeat you. However, in terms of intelligence, you're really too inferior. Tang Yi gazed at Tang Qing. What do you mean? Tang Qing smiled and said, the patriarch and the others can tell, but none of them say anything. Why? Because it's better for the Tang clan to be on good terms with Yi Xian than to be on bad terms with him. It's beneficial to the Tang clan, and I'm doing this for the sake of the Tang clan. So, I've obtained the support of the clan and the elders. But you? Speaking of this, she shook her head. I may not be able to become the heir, but I will definitely live for a long time. But second brother, you're different. You're too ambitious, strong, and talented, but you've neglected one thing, and that is that you're not the strongest. As long as you're not the strongest, you can only be a whetstone for others, and if you're not willing to be a whetstone, you may end up being replaced. Because the higher-ups will never allow internal strife in the clan. Do you understand? Tang Yi chuckled. Do you really think I'm worse than seventh brother? Tang Qing shook her head. You're not worse than him, so why do you keep targeting me? Are you a pig? Is there any benefit in targeting me? Learn from that Yi Xian. Although he's despicable and shameless most of the time, his brain really works. It's basically impossible for others to scheme against him. Most importantly, he's very good at fighting. If he were in the Tang clan, he would definitely be the best candidate for the heir. With that, she turned and left. In the same place, Tang Yi's expression was somewhat gloomy. At this moment, Tang Feng, who was not far away, suddenly walked in front of Tang Qing and said with a smile, Congratulations, big sister. Big sister, I have a treasure that just happens to be suitable for big sister. I hope big sister will accept it. Tang Yi coldly glanced at Tang Qing and Tang Feng, who were chatting and laughing not far away, and said indifferently, I, Tang Yi, will never be a whetstone for others. P.S. Today's 2 updates, but I want tickets. Want monthly tickets. Want tickets. Chapter 590. Jianghu City. After Yi Xian returned to Divine Martial City, the current Divine Martial City was already in ruins. No matter if it was the Sword Sect or the Martial Academy, both had been completely destroyed in the battle from before. As for Wuyuan and Sword Sect, not only were their sects destroyed, but they also lost a lot of people. The Sword Sect master, Yu Wuchen, and Wu Wen had died in battle. Apart from the two of them, countless other Dao realm experts had also died in battle. In the ruins of Wuyuan. The Sword Sect and Wuyuan's people were all there, and all of them were looking at the young man not far away. This young man was Yi Xian. Behind Yi Xian were Lanxiu, Mo Xia, Mo Yinqi, and the others. Presently, there were less than 200 people in the martial institution and Sword Sect combined. Amongst them, there were only 2 Dao verification realm experts left, and 1 each from the martial institution and Sword Sect. Moreover, there were only 5 knowledge realm experts left, and there were only 7 Dao realm experts. It could be said that Wuyuan and Sword Sect had suffered heavy losses. It was the worst and weakest time in history. After all, Wuyuan and Sword Sect had no trump cards, and they didn't even have a grand formation. In the battlefield, the disciples of Wuyuan and Sword Sect were looking at Yi Xian on the ruins. especially the disciples of Sword Sect. After all, Yu Wuchen had handed the Sword Sect to Yi Xian before he died. Now, only Yi Xian had the strength to lead the Sword Sect. In the hearts of all the swordsmen, Yi Xian was the sect master. Yi Xian looked around. It was a mess, and the pungent smell of blood was everywhere. Not far away on his right were corpses, and there were hundreds of them. These were the experts who had died in Wuyuan and Sword Sect. Yi Xian led the group to the pile of corpses. The first corpse belonged to Yu Wuchen. Yi Xian gazed at Yu Wuchen's corpse for a very long time. In the end, he spoke softly, "Senior Yu, your blood will not be shed in vain, and your deaths will not be in vain." As he spoke, he turned to the crowd behind him. "The Order Alliance will definitely not let us off because they will definitely eliminate us. However, what I want to say is that regardless of whether they let us off or not, Yi Xian will definitely not let them off. The blood of those who died today will not flow in vain. They will not die in vain. One day, I want the Order Alliance to be covered in rivers of blood. I want the Order Alliance to be littered with corpses. I want the Order Alliance to cease to exist in this world." Yi Xian's voice was like thunder, lingering in the ruins for a long time. After burying everyone, Yi Xian ordered the reconstruction of Wuyuan and Sword Sect. It is worth mentioning that Yi Xian became the Sword Sect's sect master, and Wuyuan's dean was also Yi Xian. Initially, Yi Xian wanted Enlancio to be the sect master, but Enlancio refused. Her reason was that Wuyuan and Sword Sect must stick together, and at this time, having a leader was undoubtedly the best. Yi Xian didn't refuse. In this situation, Wuyuan and Sword Sect needed to stick together. Otherwise, forget about revenge, they couldn't even rebuild Shenwu City. Yi Xian came to the back mountain of Wuyuan. At this time, Lian Wanli was lying on the ground. Her arms had recovered, but her injuries weren't fully healed. Lian Wanli sat on the mountain peak, looking at the distant horizon where a white cloud floated. Yi Xian sat beside Lian Wanli, asking softly, "What are you thinking about?" Lian Wanli smiled, "War." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli continued, "From Qing province until now, there have been wars everywhere. Some are big, some are small, there are many, many are endless." Yi Xian asked, "Hate war?" Lian Wanli said softly, "Just hate people dying." Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian. "That old man Wu is a good person, and this place is also a good place." Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli said again, "You will avenge him, right?" Yi Xian nodded, "Definitely." Lian Wanli smiled, "Count me in." Yi Xian said, "Okay." Saying this, he took out a few spiritual fruits and placed them in front of Lian Wanli. These healing fruits are very effective. This kind of healing fruit, basically everyone in Wuyuan and Sword Sect had one, and this time, Xiaoling was rarely generous. She did not refuse Yi Xian's request. With these healing sacred fruits, the injuries of the disciples of the martial institution and sword faction recovered at a much, much faster pace. Lian Wanli did not refuse, immediately accepting the fruits. Yi Xian stood up and left. Lian Wanli suddenly said, "Have you thought of going back to Qingzhou to have a look?" "Qingzhou?" Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. An image of Mu Mu appeared in his mind. Qingsheng, Yi Clan, the place where he was born. There, he suffered, cried, but also laughed. After a long time, Yi Xian smiled, "Busy." Saying this, he quickly disappeared not far away. Yi Xian came to a quiet place. He sat cross-legged on the ground, then entered the prison pagoda. Yi Xian came to the second floor. At this time, Yi Ling was healing. Previously in Wuyuan, Yi Ling was also seriously injured, so after he sent Yi Ling to the prison pagoda, Yi Ling had been healing. Yi Xian did not disturb Yi Ling. He quietly left the second floor, then came to the fifth floor. You glanced at Yi Xian. What are you doing?" Yi Xian said softly, "Miss Yu, please teach me how to use the remaining 2 Dao laws." Dao laws. In this battle, he found that he was still a bit weak. These years, he had been growing stronger, but at the same time, his opponents were also getting stronger. Many times, he also thought, when can he solve everything with a sword? In other words, when would he be able to solve everything with a single sword strike? He definitely could not do it now, but this was his goal. In the entire world, there was nothing in the world that couldn't be solved with a sword. You looked at Yi Xian. After a short while, she said, "Is there any benefit?" Yi Xian smiled. "What do you want?" You said, "If the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda appears again, I want them to do me a favor." Yi Xian asked, "What favor?" You said, "Let me leave this pagoda." Yi Xian was about to speak. At this moment, the prison pagoda suddenly appeared in front of him, and then it quickly swayed left and right. Seeing this scene, Yu went over and slapped it. Slap. The prison pagoda was directly slapped away. Yi Xian, Yu pointed angrily at the nearby prison pagoda. "You fool, if it wasn't for you, how could we be so miserable? Now you want to stop me from regaining my freedom. Do you want to die?" The prison pagoda trembled slightly, as if it was wronged. Yu said angrily, "Who are you blaming?" "You blame yourself. If it wasn't for you roaming around, would we have become like this? Big sister already told you that we can't beat those three, but you fool, you actually still want to fight them. It's fine if you fight them, but you still want to urge us to fight them. Why are you urging us to fight together? Why are you so stupid?" At this point, she looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know how stupid he is? He clearly can't beat them, but he still wants to fight them. Moreover, he can't beat them, but he still doesn't want to run. My God, why is he so stupid? Why do we have such a stupid pig teammate? If he can't beat them, he doesn't even know how to run, but he still wants to die. How infuriating." As soon as she finished speaking, she seemed to be unable to contain her anger, and she immediately charged towards the prison pagoda. In next to no time, the prison pagoda was beaten up by Yu, and it couldn't even fight back. It wasn't that it didn't want to control Yu, but without Yi Xian's help, it couldn't control Yu at all. A short while later, Yu returned to Yi Xian, and the prison pagoda had already fled. This time, it learned to run if it couldn't beat them. As for who it learned from, it was obvious. Yu looked at Yi Xian. "I want to remove my restriction now, but you can't do it, but I can do it in the future. Of course, it doesn't matter if you do it, or if you ask the master of the sword at the top of the pagoda to help me in the future, it's fine either way." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Miss Yu, is there a restriction in your body?" Yu said indifferently, "My duty is to protect the 5th floor, but now that the 5th floor is dead. In any case, I don't want to stay here anymore, and I don't want to have such a stupid teammate." Yi Xian said, "If you leave, will it affect this pagoda?" Yu said, "Yes, but it won't kill it, and it can't kill it. Its true strength isn't our Tao laws," but, at this point, she didn't continue. At this time, the prison pagoda suddenly appeared in front of Yu. It trembled slightly, clearly asking Yu what was so powerful about it. Yu raised her hand and slapped it, saying angrily, "Do you think I'm stupid enough to tell you?" Bang! The prison pagoda was slapped away. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Yu looked at Yi Xian. "In any case, I just want to regain my freedom. However, I won't be able to regain my freedom if I don't remove this restriction. Because if something happens to this pagoda, I'll be affected as well, and it'll be a huge one." Yi Xian thought about it and said, "All right, I promise you. However, I hope that you can leave after it recovers some of its memories." Yu looked Yi Xian in the eye. "Do you think I'm very violent?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "A little." Yu said, "It's much more violent than I am. Let me tell you, don't pity it now, because you'll suffer once it recovers." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" Yu said indifferently, "It won't submit to anyone besides master, not even big sister. As for you, it might beat you to death." Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. "I don't think it will, right?" Yu shrugged. "It's up to you whether you believe me or not." However, I'll give you a suggestion. You should either send it out before it recovers or never allow it to recover. In any case, it's pretty good right now. Even though it's still stupid, it's easy to bully. Yi Xian was speechless. Yu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly asked, who was the original owner of this pagoda? Was he powerful? Yu fell silent when he heard this. Yi Xian asked softly, can't you tell me? Yu shook his head and said, he was a very, 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 very powerful person. He knew a lot of things. In any case, he was very, very powerful. Yi Xian asked, compared to the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda, who's more powerful? Yu fell silent. Chapter 591. The owner of the prison pagoda. Yi Xian was also very curious about this person. Although he did not know much about the prison pagoda, from the people it imprisoned, it was enough to prove how terrifying it was. And the person who created the prison pagoda was definitely even more terrifying. So here came the question. Was the owner of the prison pagoda stronger or the owner of the sword at the top of the pagoda stronger? At this moment, Yu suddenly said, why are you asking so many questions? Yi Xian smiled, I'm curious. Yu said calmly, you just need to understand one thing. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, what? Yu said, don't care if they are strong or not, you are very weak anyway. Yi Xian, Yu said calmly, go outside, I will teach you how to use the Tao of space. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded, okay. Yu brought Yi Xian to the back mountain of Wuyuan and looked down from the top of the mountain. Yu looked down and said softly, actually, the fourth dimension is very good, why do those idiots want to go to the fifth dimension? Yi Xian said solemnly, isn't the fifth dimension good? Yu said calmly, I can't say it's not good, I can only say that the fourth dimension is very good, why go to the fifth dimension? The moon in the fifth dimension is not as round as here. Or do you humans always think that other places are better than your homeworld? Yi Xian said with a smile, no, in any case, I think the fourth dimension is very good. Yu looked up at the distant horizon and said softly, this world is always like this, many people want to come out with their lives, and many people want to go in with their lives. How would mortals know that what they possess is what others yearn for even in their dreams? Hearing Yu's words, Yi Xian fell silent. The fifth dimension might not be a good place. That's right, if it was a very good place, why would this lousy pagoda come out? No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like it came out to play. Meanwhile, Yu suddenly looked at Yi Xian. She waved her right hand lightly, and the spatial Tao law within Yi Xian's body suddenly flew out and landed firmly in her palm. Yu was instantly infuriated when he saw the spatial Tao law. It's all because of that stupid pagoda. That idiot. Yi Xian was speechless. Yu looked at Yi Xian, can you play with the space? Yi Xian's expression was rather strange. Playing with space? Yu said, it's the understanding of space. Yi Xian nodded. I understand, but compared to Miss Yu, she's definitely much worse. Yu nodded. Although you're weak, you're not completely useless. It's alright, I'll teach you. With that, she waved her right hand. In an instant, the space around Yi Xian began to tremble. Yi Xian was puzzled. This is? Yu asked, do you know what space is? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, what else could it be? Yu shook her head. Uncultured people are truly terrifying. Yi Xian was speechless. An ancient book appeared in her grasp with a flip of her right hand. She opened it and read it for a while before she said, space is an objective form of existence that's opposite to time, but they're inseparable. According to the theory of the universe's dimensions, after the universe exploded, the state of the universe split apart from the initial one. That's why all things have different forms of existence. The difference in position between objects is called space, and the change in position is measured by time. Space is represented by length, width, height, and size. It usually refers to the four directions, up and down. When she spoke up to this point, she looked at Yi Xian. Do you understand? Yi Xian was dumbfounded. Yu shook her head and sighed. It's truly terrifying to not study properly. As she spoke, she gazed at the ancient book in her hand and continued, let me give you a simple introduction. There are many types of space, and the known ones are universal space, dimensional space, thought space. These three are all categories of space. Right now, the space you're in is dimensional space, and this dimensional space is divided into absolute space and relative space. Space is formed by different lines, and the lines form different shapes. Within the lines is space. Space is a relative concept, and it forms the abstract concept of things. The abstract concept of things exists with reference to space. Your current level of control over space is only at the level of simple destruction. For example, you can use your strength to forcefully destroy this space. That's brute force, and it can't be considered as controlling space. With that, she closed the ancient book and looked at Yi Xian. Do you understand? Yi Xian thought for a moment before he said, you said that space is formed by different lines. In other words, I can actually change these lines and cause chaos or reorganization in space. Yu blinked and said, wait, let me take a look. After that, she opened the ancient book in her hand. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Yu looked at Yi Xian. In theory, you're right. However, it's not a simple matter. Because the spatial lines are protected by laws and Tao laws. That's why the Tao laws and laws of this world can immediately repair the space after you destroy it. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be able to destroy these laws and Tao laws because you're not as strong as the Tendo of this world. However, you have the spatial Tao law now. This spatial Tao law isn't a fourth-dimensional Tao law, but a fifth-dimensional Tao law. Yi Xian asked, can a fifth-dimensional Tao law control a fourth-dimensional Tao law? Wouldn't I be overstepping my authority? Yu looked at Yi Xian and blinked as if she was thinking about this. After a short while, she opened the ancient book again. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while later, Yu closed the ancient book and looked at Yi Xian. I won't overstep my authority. Yi Xian asked, why? Yu said, whether it's the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension, it's within the scope of the universe. The fifth-dimensional Tao law is higher than the fourth-dimensional Tao law. Therefore, the fifth-dimensional Tao law can reverse the fourth dimension. Of course, you have to be careful because there's a Tendo in the fourth dimension, and you can't defeat a Tendo. Therefore, it's risky for you to reverse the fourth dimension because the Tendo might come after you. It's like if you suddenly seduce someone's wife, they'll definitely come after you. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Can't you use a better analogy? Yu continued, now, you can start by reorganizing the space. That is, you have to control these spatial lines and reorganize them. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, reorganizing the space? What's the use of that? Yu opened the ancient book. After reading for a while, she looked at Yi Xian. Space cut. With that, she looked to the right, where there was an ancient tree. She opened her palm, and in an instant, Qi. Under Yi Xian's astonished gaze, the space where the ancient tree was suddenly distorted layer by layer. At the same time, the ancient tree soundlessly broke into countless pieces, and then mysteriously disappeared. Yu looked at Yi Xian. Reorganizing the space, space cut, and spatial teleportation. If you can master these three, you can easily erase a person from this space. You can start by reorganizing the space now. Yi Xian asked, how do I reorganize the space? Yu looked at the ancient book in her hand again. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked, can I have a look? Yu generously gave the ancient book to Yi Xian. When Yi Xian opened it, he was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand it. He had never seen the words in the ancient book before. Yi Xian smiled sheepishly and returned the ancient book to Yu. Then he asked, "What book is this? Who wrote it?" You said calmly, "Spatial theory." "It was written by my former master." Yi Xian said, "Oh." Then he said, "Did your master write any other books?" You said, "Master wrote too many books. One of them was called—" "Oh, I remember. It was called Cosmology. Big sister likes this book very much." With that, she looked at Yi Xian. "Don't waste time. Hurry up and learn it. I'll teach you." After that, she looked at the ancient book in her hand. Spatial lines. You can't see them, but you can feel them. Integrate your mind into the space and feel the spatial lines. Yi Xian didn't think much and hurriedly did as she said. Southern Wasteland World, Qin family. The Qin family was a subsidiary of the Tang family, but they betrayed the Tang family. Logically speaking, the Qin family should have disappeared from the world. However, unexpectedly, the Qin family was still alive and well. On this day, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the sky above the Qin family. This person was the Tang family's patriarch, Tang Yen. Tang Yen looked down at the Qin family below. Without any nonsense, he slammed his palm down. A powerful force crushed down on the Qin family below. Just as the force landed on the Qin family, it disappeared without a trace. At this time, Qin Zhong of the Qin family appeared in the courtyard. He looked up at Tang Yen and smiled. "Since you're here, why don't you come down and have a seat?" Tang Yen glanced at Qin Zhong, then turned and left. In the courtyard, Qin Zhong withdrew his gaze and fell silent. After a long time, he turned and left. Eastern Wasteland World. The Eastern Wasteland World was also part of the chaotic universe, but this place had almost been forgotten by the people of the other three Wasteland Worlds. This was because the people of the Eastern Wasteland World had not set foot in the God Burial Plain for thousands of years. The God Burial Plain was a barren land. The sky was gray all year round, and the spiritual chi was thin. There wasn't even an ant, let alone a human. In the center of the God Burial Plain stood an iron pillar that was dozens of meters long. A middle-aged man hung on the iron pillar. The middle-aged man hung on the iron pillar, his long hair covering his face. At this time, a little girl of about 16 years old walked over slowly with an old man. The little girl wore a simple white silk robe. Her features were as beautiful as a painting. Although she was young, she was already devastatingly beautiful. A sheathed longsword hung from her waist. Her brows were as sharp as swords, and her eyes were cold. Her peerless features carried an aura that looked down on the world. The little girl walked to the bottom of the pillar and looked up at it. "Is this the Gu Tatian who stopped my divine nation from advancing west all those years ago?" Behind her, the old man bowed slightly. "Not really." The little girl remained expressionless and waited quietly for the old man to continue. The old man pointed into the distance. There was a bottomless fissure there that stretched across the entire God Burial Plain. The fissure was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been cut by a sharp sword. The old man opened his palm, and a crystal ball appeared in his hand. In the next moment, a strand of dazzling blue light erupted from the crystal ball, and it didn't take long for a screen of water to appear in the sky. God Burial Plains was within that screen of water. On the right was a middle-aged man in purple armor. He held a spear and his eyes were as deep as the starry sky. Behind him was a million-strong divine nation army. A black Shao Ta floated in front of the army. A woman in a plain dress stood on top of the Shao Ta. She held a sword in her hand and drew a line on the ground with her right hand. In an instant, a sword mark that was so wide that one could not see the end of it. The plain-clothed woman pointed her sword at the sword scar. "Realm Crosser, die." The middle-aged man on the right looked at the woman expressionlessly. He pointed his spear at Gu Tatian who was hanging on the iron pillar not far away. "This is your fate. Kill." With that, the million-strong army charged forward. Chapter 592. Seeing the army of 1 million rushing over, the woman in the plain dress above the black Xiao Ta expressionlessly slashed down with her sword. Chi! A ray of sword light descended from the sky. Before the million-strong army could react, their heads fell to the ground in an orderly manner. In the blink of an eye, there were millions of corpses on the ground. One sword, 1 million corpses. As for the middle-aged man leading the group, his physical body had already disappeared, leaving behind only his soul. Not only that, his soul was becoming more and more illusory. The middle-aged man looked at the woman in the plain dress blankly. "Are you a god?" The woman in the plain dress smirked. "Can a deity withstand my sword?" As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and entered the black Xiao Ta. In next to no time, the black Xiao Ta vanished into the boundless horizon. The middle-aged man disappeared, and the image abruptly stopped. The old man put the crystal ball away and said softly, "My divine nation lost all its elites in that battle all those years ago. If Gu Taishan's corpse hadn't suppressed the Order Alliance and the other forces, my divine nation would have probably vanished from this world as well." When he spoke up to this point, he looked at Gu Taishan's corpse and said softly, "Everyone in the world thinks that it was Gu Tatian who forced the god race to retreat, but how could they know that the real person who stopped the god race was the woman in a plain dress who was even stronger than a god?" A woman in a plain dress. At this moment, the little girl suddenly walked over to the mark, and the sword on her waist started to tremble violently. Sword intent. The sword mark on the ground contained a sword intent that hadn't dissipated even after 1,000 years. At this moment, the old man's expression suddenly changed. "Do not approach." The little girl raised her right hand and gestured for the old man to step back. The old man did not dare to disobey and immediately retreated to the side. The little girl slowly walked towards the sword will, and the sword will grew stronger and stronger. It had already targeted her. The little girl's expression did not change. She continued to walk forward, and the sword at her waist began to tremble violently, as if it was about to be unsheathed. The little girl pressed down on the sheath with her left hand and continued forward. It didn't take long for her to arrive before the mark. Meanwhile, the sword intent suddenly transformed into a sword that slashed towards her. The little girl's expression didn't change. She suddenly took a step forward, drew her sword, and slashed. Chi! A wisp of sword light slashed down. Extraordinary sword saint. This sword strike directly exposed the little girl's strength. A 16-year-old transcendent sword saint. The little girl's sword slashed at the sword will. In an instant, she retreated. However, she quickly charged forward again. This time, she didn't attack. Instead, she allowed the sword will to stand on top of her head. Not far away, the old man's expression changed drastically, but he was soon dumbfounded. Because the sword intent was directly absorbed by the little girl. The little girl stood there, the sword at her waist trembling violently, and the sword intent flowed endlessly into the little girl's body. About 15 minutes later, the little girl suddenly pulled out her long sword. Buzz! A sword cry soared into the sky, straight into the clouds. At this moment, this sword intent covered the entire starry sky. At this moment, the little girl's sword Dao went from saintly to godly. The sword mark on the ground also disappeared. After a long time, the little girl turned around and left. "Pass down my order. Summon all the kings and 26 saints to see me." The old man quietly retreated. Northern Wasteland Domain, Order Alliance. Inside the hall, the Star Lord sat quietly with an ancient book in his hand. There was only one person in the hall, Master Ku. Master Ku said softly, "Our best choice now is to wait and see." The Star Lord didn't say anything. Master Ku continued, "Of course, we can't let Yi Xian grow." The Star Lord looked at Master Ku. "Continue." Master Ku said in a deep voice, "The Tang clan. If we can stop the Tang clan from interfering, we can easily destroy Yi Xian and Shenwu City." The Star Lord shook his head. "The Tang clan will definitely interfere." Master Ku nodded. Then let someone else restrain the Tang clan. The Star Lord frowned. The Monster Clan? Master Ku nodded. If the Monster Clan can restrain the Tang clan, it'll be easy for us to kill Yi Xian. The Star Lord shook his head. The Monster Clan is ambitious. If we ask them to help, we'll have to pay a huge price. Moreover, the Monster Clan is a foreign race. We can't trust them. Master Ku said in a deep voice, "This is our only choice." The Star Lord said softly, "Let me think about it." Master Ku nodded slightly and left the room without saying anything else. In the hall, the Star Lord remained silent for a long time before he finally stood up and left. Jianghu City. Under the joint efforts of Wu Yuan and the Sword Sect, 5 to 6 cities had been restored. After all, they weren't ordinary people. It was undoubtedly a simple matter for them to build a city. However, because of the Order Alliance, the aristocratic families and merchants in the city had either died or left. Now, the entire city was empty except for the disciples of the Sword Sect and Wu Yuan. No, there's still one force that hasn't left, the Treasure Trade Union. Not only did they not leave, but they also gave a lot of support to Wu Yuan and the Sword Sect in building the Jianghu city. Otherwise, it would be quite difficult for the city to be built so quickly. On this day, Biyao from the Treasure Trade Union came to the Sword Sect and sat quietly in a hall that had yet to be built. After some time, a man walked into the hall. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian walked to Biyao and sat opposite her. He smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry to have made you wait for so long." Biyao smiled. "It's nothing." Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Biyao, you must have something to tell me today, right?" Biyao nodded. "I have something to discuss with you." Yi Xian said, "Please speak." Biyao said, "There are many things waiting to be done in the Jianghu city. Do you have any ideas?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss Biyao, don't beat around the bush with me. Just tell me what you're here for." Biyao nodded. "I have an idea. I want to start a new trade union here." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Miss Biyao, you must think this through. There's basically no one in the Jianghu city now. Not only that, but the Order Alliance might make a comeback at any time. At that time, your trade union will suffer great losses." Biyao smiled. "Of course I know that." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why do you still want to come?" Biyao said, "I have an idea. You can listen to it. You can use your status as the Jianghu city lord to invite the Tang clan, the Monster clan, and some other forces here. You can allow them to establish their own trade unions or forces here. Of course, they will have to pay rent. You can rent the land to them for a certain period." Yi Xian frowned. "They will come?" Biyao smiled. "Definitely. Because there's a divine vein here. That divine vein still exists beneath the Jianghu city. This is a holy land for cultivation. Many martial artists are willing to come here. And as long as people come, those forces will definitely settle here because of the benefits. For example, the Tang clan. The Tang clan's young masters and Miss Tang Qing all have their own private army. What do they need to raise a private army? They need money. And the Jianghu city is such a good place. If you open it to the public, they will definitely be tempted. Not only the Tang clan, but the Monster clan as well. Although the Monster clan doesn't meddle with our affairs, some of their merchants are active outside. In the past, the Jianghu city didn't allow those big forces to come here. But now, if you open it to the public, they will definitely come." Yi Xian said solemnly, "Once they come, the Jianghu city will be everyone's Jianghu city." The 100 Tribes Alliance nodded. At that time, even if the Order Alliance wants to take action, they will only dare to target you, the Sword Sect, and Wu Yuan. They won't dare to target the Jianghu city. Of course, if you are strong enough and can unite these forces, as long as the benefits are sufficient, it's not impossible for them to resist the Order Alliance with you. Moreover, with these forces joining in, outsiders will feel relieved. At that time, more people will come to the Shenwu city. Yi Xian thought about it and nodded. It's indeed a good idea. Then, he looked at Baiji. Miss Baiji, please choose a place. 10 years of rent-free. He was naturally grateful to Baiji. She had helped him a lot in the past. Baiji smiled. I won't refuse. Yi Xian smiled. There's one more thing I need to trouble you with. How much rent do you think is appropriate? Baiji thought about it and said, this needs to be discussed. Yi Xian nodded. I'll find someone to discuss with you. Then, he transmitted his voice with his mystic qi. A moment later, a woman came in. This person was Jianghu. Jianghu glanced at Yi Xian. What's the matter? Yi Xian nodded. Little Zhou, I want you to be the chief steward of the Shenwu city. You will be in charge of everything in the Shenwu city. In short, you can discuss with Miss Baiji. Then, he stood up and left. Baiji shook her head and smiled. Take charge. Jianghu looked at Baiji. The latter said in a low voice, Miss Jiang, you need to write a letter to those big forces in the name of young Master Yi. Sincerely invite them to the Shenwu city. Come, I'll tell you which forces you need to invite. The first is the Tang clan, the monster clan, and, while the two of them were discussing, Yi Xian had returned to the mountain behind the sword sect. At the peak of the mountain, Yu stood there silently while a tiny void character floated above her palm. It was the Space Dao Law. Yi Xian walked over to Yu's back, and the latter said, You've more or less grasped the theoretical knowledge of space, so you can put it into practice. However, you can't utilize the Space Dao Law during practice. Otherwise, it would be equivalent to cheating. Yi Xian nodded, and then he calmed down. It didn't take long for the space around him to start trembling gradually. You just watched Yi Xian from the side, and she corrected him from time to time. Around an hour later, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly folded. The folded space seemed extremely strange because the scene within the folded space was abstract, and it was extremely strange. Around another 2 hours later, the space in front of Yi Xian started to move swiftly. Reorganization. The space in front of Yi Xian was reorganizing strangely. The scene was indescribable with words. P.S. Many readers have tipped me recently, and many readers have silently voted for me. You could have chosen to read the pirated version, but you didn't. Not only did you read the original version, but you also spent money to tip me. A straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. Are you interested in me? Chapter 593. Spatial Reconstruction. Under Yu's guidance, Yi Xian didn't use Space Dao Law and could use those spatial lines to reconstruct space. However, it was a little slow and obviously wouldn't work against an enemy. Fortunately, this was just the beginning. Soon, under Yi Xian's control, the space around him began to form all sorts of strange shapes. Not only that, but he could also use spatial cutting to directly decompose the matter and energy in the space. This was so lethal that even he was a little apprehensive. Spatial cutting technique. This was actually an ancient secret technique. Just like that, Yi Xian cultivated crazily every day in the Sword Sect's back mountain. Under Jianghu and Baiji's operation, some forces and cultivators gradually entered Shenwu city. After all, there were divine veins here, which was very suitable for cultivation. However, not many people came over because they were still wary of the Lawful Order Alliance. No one knew when the Lawful Order Alliance would attack. Therefore, many people were still waiting and watching. On this day, Tang clan's eldest daughter suddenly announced that she would enter Shenwu city. This news caused an uproar. Tang clan entered Shenwu city? Tang clan was a top force. They actually entered Shenwu city. What did this mean? At this time, the demon race also entered Shenwu city. Although it wasn't announced publicly, the news spread. The demon race entered Jianghu city. This caused an uproar. The demon race, Tang clan, and Jianghu city formed an alliance. Now, this was circulating outside. Therefore, more and more people entered Jianghu city. Moreover, some forces of the surrounding star fields also began to enter Jianghu city. After these people entered Jianghu city, it became more and more lively, even more so than before. Because in the past, Jianghu city wasn't completely open to the public. But now, it was completely open to the public. Therefore, more and more people entered Jianghu city. However, to establish a foothold in Jianghu city, one had to rent land. What surprised Yi Xian was that many people rented land, and some good places were rented by Jianghu in the form of auctions. Some good places were immediately snatched up. All in all, Jianghu city's current development momentum was very good. And the sword sect's disciples and Wu Yuan students also got along very well because they had experienced life and death together. While Jianghu city was developing, the Lawful Order Alliance didn't make any moves. Back mountain of the sword sect. Yi Xian was still madly studying space. Under Yu's guidance, his understanding and mastery of the Tao of space had advanced by leaps and bounds. During this period of time, he hadn't used the space Tao law at all. According to Yu, if he were to use the space Tao law now, it would be like using an external object. Only after thoroughly comprehending the space Tao and adding this Tao law would he be able to fully unleash the power of the space Tao law. Moreover, this was the only way to minimize the backlash he would suffer. Half a month passed. On this day, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the edge of a cliff. Not far in front of him, Yu stood silently. Besides Yu, there was also Yi Ling. At this time, Yi Ling's injuries had completely recovered. Not only that, but she also cultivated with Yu every day. Yu seemed to favor Yi Ling very much and frequently guided her. Under Yu's guidance, Yi Ling's cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds. Right at this moment, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly started to be sliced apart. The space seemed as if it had been sliced by a sharp blade, and numerous long cracks appeared on it. This wasn't a cut caused by an external force, but a spatial cut instead. There was a huge difference in essence, and the difference in might was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Yu looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. It's not bad. You can use the space Tao law now. As she spoke, she flicked her finger, and the space Tao law flew over to Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at Yu. Miss Yu, I feel that it's the same even without the space Tao law now. Confidence. In his opinion, his attainments in the Tao of space were already very deep. So, he was extremely confident. Yu sneered. Confidence is a good thing, but overconfidence might be a bad thing. Yi Xian smiled. All right, then I'll give the space Tao law a try. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and the space Tao law suddenly fell into his palm. Yi Xian gazed at Yu. Miss Yu, how do I use it? Yu said, activate it. Yi Xian nodded. His profound energy surged as he activated the space Tao law. In next to no time, the space Tao law transformed into a ray of white light that entered the space between his brows. Meanwhile, Yu's voice resounded. Sense it. Yi Xian hurriedly sensed the space around him. Suddenly, his expression changed. Because he noticed that the space around him was extremely clear, and it was at least 10 times clearer than before. Moreover, he felt that space was intimate to him as he sensed it. Intimate. This wasn't present in the past at all. Yu suddenly said, try controlling this space. Yi Xian hurriedly nodded when he heard this, and then he started to control the space around him. It didn't take long for the space before him to reform at an extremely swift speed, and it was so swift that Yi Xian was stunned on the spot. It was at least 10 times faster. Not only that, because, when he manipulated these spatial lines, there were no obstructions. He was like the master of this space. This feeling was too wonderful. Yi Xian did not stop. He began to use spatial slash again. Just as this thought rose in his mind, hundreds of spatial cracks suddenly appeared in the space in front of him. Spatial laceration. Yi Xian was stunned. Right at this moment, Yu added, you can even utilize space to form spatial barriers. Yi Xian stretched out his right hand when he heard this, and then he clenched it lightly. As soon as he did this, the space before him started to shrink layer by layer. In practically an instant, the space before him had condensed into a spatial barrier, and it was so thick that it shocked him. It was so thick that even a Dao-confirming expert wouldn't be able to move it. Of course, this was the contribution of the spatial Dao law. Under normal circumstances, these spaces wouldn't be able to do this. It could be said that the space Dao law strengthened these spaces and made them even more powerful. You said indifferently, does it feel the same? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, Miss Yu, the spatial Dao law is so powerful. Powerful? Yu laughed coldly, you can only say that you've grasped a tiny bit of it. The path of space is boundless, and very few are able to fully grasp it. If you can fully grasp it, then you can directly change the space in this universe with a single thought, and it's even to the extent that space within this universe can be reorganized. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, really? You spoke indifferently, you'll need at least 10,000 years to accomplish what I just said. So, give up. Because you won't be able to live for 10,000 years. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, why can't I live for 10,000 years? You gazed at Yi Xian, once that stupid pagoda within you recovers its consciousness, it'll definitely kill you first. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, it probably won't. Yu laughed coldly and remained silent. Yi Xian suddenly said, why don't I kill it first? Yu was speechless. Meanwhile, the pagoda suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when the pagoda smashed towards him. Yi Xian turned around and ran. I was joking. I was joking. Yiling covered her mouth and chuckled as she watched Yi Xian being chased around. Right at this moment, a shadow suddenly appeared in the sky above Yiling, and then it shot explosively towards Yiling. You flared up with rage, you dare attack while I'm still here? Do I look very weak? Huh? Chapter 594. As soon as she finished speaking, Yu suddenly vanished on the spot. Bang! As soon as Yu vanished, the afterimage shot out, and it flew over 1 kilometer away. As soon as it stopped, the space around it condensed into a spatial cage that trapped it within it. It was a black-clothed figure. Yi Xian appeared before the black-clothed figure, and the latter laughed savagely, Yi Xian, Meanwhile, Yi Xian raised his hand and swung his sword. Hiss! The black-clothed figure's head instantly flew into the air. The head fell slowly to the ground, and its eyes were wide open and filled with astonishment. Yi Xian sheathed his sword and said, you talk too much. Yu gazed at Yi Xian and said, aren't you going to ask who sent him? Yi Xian spoke indifferently, it's not important. Yu asked, why? Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he said, no matter who sent him, so long as he dares to send someone, then I dare to kill him. Yu thought for a moment and said, I've noticed something, and I don't know if I should tell you. Yi Xian asked, what is it? Yu gazed at Yi Xian and said, I suddenly thought of something. In the future, you won't just have to face experts from the 4th dimension, you'll have to face experts from the 5th dimension as well. Yi Xian was stunned. Why? Yu spoke indifferently, because you have a treasure. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, the prison pagoda? Yu nodded. Do you know the true function of this stupid pagoda? Yi Xian shook his head. Yu spoke softly, there's something that everyone wants to obtain in this stupid pagoda. Even Big Sister coveted it all those years ago. Of course, everyone wants it. Yi Xian asked, what is it? Yu gazed at Yi Xian and said, I won't tell you. Yi Xian was speechless. "Ah," Yu continued, "I won't tell you." As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Ling back to the prison pagoda. She wanted to personally train Yi Ling. Yi Xian was speechless. After a while, Yi Xian continued to study the Space Dao Law. At this moment, he finally realized how terrifying the Space Dao Law was. This was definitely more terrifying than a Dao realm treasure. If used well, its power could really destroy the heavens and earth. As for the Dream Dao Law, Yi Xian didn't choose to study it because he still hadn't fully understood the Space Dao Law. Biting off more than one can chew. Other than researching the Dao Law of space, Yi Xian was also getting the members of the sword sect to prepare a sword for him. Breakthrough to the next realm. His current battle prowess was actually based on the superposition of all things, and his own realm was very low. This was his greatest weakness. In short, what he needed to do now was to settle down. Order Alliance. At this time, in the main hall, the experts of the Order Alliance were arguing. The topic of discussion was Yi Xian. The current divine martial city's development momentum was too good. If this continued, it would be extremely disadvantageous to the Order Alliance. Especially that Yi Xian. It could be said that the Order Alliance wouldn't be able to eat and sleep in peace if the monster, Yi Xian, was still alive. The reason why there was such a huge debate was that they would have to face the Tang clan if they wanted to kill Yi Xian. Moreover, if the Astral Lord couldn't do anything, almost no one in the Order Alliance could kill Yi Xian. Suddenly, an old man stood out and said ferociously, "Astral Lord, Yi Xian can't be left alive. I suggest we use the Divine Dao Army." The Star Lords narrowed their eyes when they heard that. Meanwhile, Master Ku Ku suddenly roared furiously, "How dare you!" The old man's expression changed slightly, but he didn't back down. Instead, he continued, "Astral Lord, Master Ku Ku, Yi Xian is a threat to the Order Alliance." The Astral Lord suddenly shook his head. "Stand down." The old man's expression was quite ugly. He didn't dare to say anything else and left. The Astral Lord slowly closed his eyes. "Even if the Realm Defense Alliance is destroyed, we can't use this army." Everyone in the hall fell silent. The Divine Dao Army. The Order Alliance's greatest trump card. At this moment, Master Ku Ku suddenly said, "There's something strange about the Qin clan. I've sent people to investigate, but all of them disappeared without a trace." The Astral Lord looked at Master Ku Ku, and the latter said, "Someone's behind them." After a moment of silence, the Astral Lord said, "I'll take responsibility for this personally." Master Ku Ku suddenly asked, "What about Yi Xian and the Shenwu city?" The Astral Lord fell silent. Master Ku Ku continued, "This person can't be left alive, or it'll be difficult to deal with him in the future." The Astral Lord said, "I'll make a trip to the Demon Clan." The Demon Clan. Master Ku Ku nodded. It was obvious that the Astral Lord had decided to seek help from the Demon Clan. As long as the Demon Clan could restrain Tang Yen, it would be very easy to eliminate Yi Xian. Just when the Astral Lord was about to leave, he suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance. A dragon's roar could be heard from the horizon. Inside the hall, everyone turned to look outside the hall. Outside the hall, a giant dragon soared over, and on the back of the giant dragon stood a man. A Divine Dao soldier. Soon, the giant dragon stopped in the sky above the Order Alliance, and the man on the giant dragon descended. He quickly walked to the Astral Lord, but he did not kneel down. Instead, he bowed slightly. "Astral Lord, the theocracy has invaded." The theocracy had invaded. All the experts of the Order Alliance were petrified when they heard that. Almost at the same time, a Divine Dao soldier arrived at the Tang clan. The Divine Dao soldier descended from the sky above the Tang clan and bowed slightly to Tang Yen. "Patriarch Tang, the theocracy has invaded." The theocracy. Tang Yen and the rest were dumbfounded when they heard that. In the distant Demon Clan, an old man was sitting in front of a cave. He lay on a wooden chair and held a scroll in his hand. On the scroll, there were 4 words, Yi Xian's information. As he read, the old man said softly, the theocracy's guardian beast. Dragon soul. At this moment, a divine Dao soldier appeared in the sky above the demon clan. No one stopped him because he was riding a giant dragon. Moreover, no one dared to stop him. The divine Dao soldier landed in front of the old man and bowed slightly. Your Excellency, Demon King, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded. The old man narrowed his eyes. After a moment, he nodded slightly. Understood. In the distant northern wasteland world, in an unknown small city, a middle-aged man sat by the river and fished. There was a small wooden bucket beside him. Not far away from him, a woman was also fishing. This person was Jianghu. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly pulled on his fishing rod. In an instant, a fish flew out of the river and landed steadily in a wooden bucket beside Jianghu. The middle-aged man laughed heartily and looked at Jianghu, who was not far away. Little girl, are you feeling bored? Jianghu did not speak. The middle-aged man smiled. Fishing is also cultivation. It cultivates the heart. If the heart is calm, everything will be clear. Jianghu nodded slightly. Then, she grabbed a fish from the river with her right hand. The middle-aged man, at this moment, Jianghu released the 2 fish into the river. But soon, she grabbed them with her right hand again. But after playing with them for a while, she put them down again, the fish. At this moment, there was a dragon's roar in the sky. Hearing this, the middle-aged man frowned. He looked up at the sky and saw a giant dragon flying over. Soon, the giant dragon arrived in the sky and a divine Dao soldier landed. He came before the middle-aged man and bowed slightly, his expression very respectful. Master Wu, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded. The middle-aged man frowned. Is the news accurate? The divine Dao soldier nodded. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man said, understood. The divine Dao soldier bowed again and quietly retreated. Nearby, Jianghu put down the 2 fish and looked at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man said softly, the world has changed. On a certain mountain range in the southern wasteland world, a skinny old man sat silently. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. In the clouds in the sky, a giant dragon was flying over. The scrawny old man furrowed his brows. He stood up and took a step forward. With this step, he arrived directly in front of the dragon. At this moment, the dragon was still flying. Therefore, the force of impact was extremely powerful. The skinny old man pressed down lightly with his right hand, and the giant dragon was forced to stop on the spot. The giant dragon looked at the skinny old man with dense fear in its eyes. On the back of the giant dragon, the divine Dao soldier hurriedly flew down. He came before the skinny old man and bowed respectfully. Perfected Master Chu. Perfected Master Chu. One of the 6 supreme experts of the current era. Perfected Master Chu looked at the divine Dao soldier. Did the Order Alliance summon you back to deal with that Yi Xian? His voice was calm, but it made one shudder. The divine Dao soldier shook his head. No, the theocracy has invaded. The theocracy had invaded. Perfected Master Chu instantly frowned when he heard this. After a moment, he nodded slightly. Understood. The divine Dao soldier bowed slightly and retreated. Perfected Master Chu raised his head and looked at the end of the horizon. There was a trace of worry in his eyes. Theocracy. So many years had passed. How strong was this mysterious country now? No one knew. Because no one dared to step into this mysterious country. Even the 6 supreme experts didn't dare to step into God Burial Plain. After a moment, Perfected Master Chu turned and looked at the thatched cottage not far away. Iron Bull, let's go. After that, a tall and sturdy youth walked out of the thatched cottage. Perfected Master Chu brought the youth and disappeared not far away. On the way, the tall and sturdy youth asked, "Master, is the theocracy very strong?" Perfected Master Chu said, "Yes." The tall and sturdy youth grinned. "Then there will definitely be a lot of fights." Perfected Master Chu said, "Not only will there be a lot of fights, but many people will also die." Jianghu City. On this day, a dragon's roar suddenly sounded from the distant horizon. In the next moment, a giant dragon flew over from the horizon. Within Jianghu City, countless people looked at the horizon. At this moment, the giant dragon had already arrived above Jianghu City. On the giant dragon's back, the divine Dao soldier looked down. "Are the Wuyuan Dean and Sword Sect Master here?" At this moment, a youth appeared in front of the giant dragon. The giant dragon looked at Yi Xian, its eyes filled with caution. Yi Xian glanced at the giant dragon and then at the divine Dao soldier. "You are?" The divine Dao soldier looked at Yi Xian. "You are?" Yi Xian said, "I am the Sword Sect Master and Wuyuan Dean." The divine Dao soldier was stunned. He sized up Yi Xian and then said, "Sir, the theocracy has invaded." The theocracy had invaded? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. "That's a good thing," the divine Dao soldier. Chapter 595. Good thing? The divine Dao soldier in front of Yi Xian was dazed. Yi Xian was about to speak when Tang Qing suddenly appeared next to Yi Xian. She looked at the divine Dao soldier. "We know. We will arrange it as soon as possible." The divine Dao soldier nodded and left on the dragon. After it left, Tang Qing stared at Yi Xian. "Do you want to die?" Yi Xian was confused. "What do you mean?" Tang Qing said, "Do you know what the divine Dao soldier is?" Yi Xian shook his head. "No." Tang Qing said softly, "The divine Dao soldier is an army created by all the forces. Moreover, it wasn't created recently. It has been around for thousands of years. On this continent, many forces have disappeared, but the divine Dao soldier has never disappeared. Not only that, there are also experts from Wuyuan and Sword Sect." Yi Xian frowned. "An army created by all the forces? What are they used for?" Tang Qing said, "To fight against theocracy." Then, she looked to the east and said softly, "That mysterious nation from the eastern wasteland domain." Then, she looked at Yi Xian. "Are you thinking that theocracy's invasion is a good thing for you?" Yi Xian nodded. "Indeed." Tang Qing said, "If that's what you think, then you really aren't far from death." Yi Xian was confused. "Why?" Tang Qing said, "Fighting against theocracy is everyone's responsibility. If you don't resist and even try to sneak attack the Order Alliance, then all the forces will work together to get rid of you first. Including my Tang clan, we will definitely work together with the Order Alliance to get rid of you first. Because at a time like this, all grudges must be put down. No one is allowed to cause internal strife." Yi Xian was silent. Tang Qing continued, "When theocracy invades, all the forces will be purged. Under such circumstances, all the forces must unite against them. In the past, the powers of the continent had made an alliance called the Offensive and Defensive Alliance. Back then, all the forces participated in this alliance, including the Sword Sect and Wuyuan. Not only that, but every 5 years, they would send experts to God Burial Plain." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Can't I refuse?" Tang Qing shook his head. "At this time, whoever causes internal strife will die first. As long as you don't take the initiative to cause trouble, the Order Alliance definitely won't dare to target you. If they do, the other forces and the higher-ups won't agree either." At this point, she looked straight at Yi Xian. "If you don't want to be targeted by everyone, you must participate. Once you participate, with your current strength and reputation, the higher-ups will definitely agree. Not only that, they won't let the Order Alliance target you. If you choose not to participate, the Order Alliance will instigate you and I can be sure that all the forces will join hands to deal with you first because you are too dangerous." Moreover, they are afraid that you will seek refuge with God Nation. Therefore, you must declare your position as soon as possible. You have no choice. Because you are too dangerous, if you don't declare your position, everyone will be afraid that you will seek refuge with the God race. Yi Xian nodded slightly, I understand. At this time, he was a little surprised because he didn't expect these forces to join hands to form an army. Moreover, the Sword Sect and Wu Yuan both participated. Their purpose was to fight against God Nation. God Nation. He knew very little about this nation, only that 1,000 years ago, God Nation invaded. And he had no idea how powerful this nation was. At this time, a figure suddenly appeared above the two of them. That figure said, Sect Leader Yi, God Nation is invading. The Star Lord invites Sect Leader Yi to Ascending Heaven City for a discussion. The Star Lord invites you. Yi Xian smiled, let's go. That figure nodded slightly and turned to leave. Yi Xian looked at Tang Qing, Miss Tang Qing, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the matters in the city. Tang Qing looked straight at Yi Xian, don't act recklessly. Yi Xian smiled, do I look like a reckless person to you? Ha. With that, he turned and disappeared into the distant horizon. Tang Qing looked at Yi Xian in the sky, a trace of worry in her eyes. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at Ascending Heaven City. As soon as he arrived, several powerful auras locked onto him. So strong. Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. These auras were not weaker than the Star Lord. Yi Xian's expression was calm. He came to Ascending Heaven Hall. In front of the hall, he saw a familiar person. Zhao Mu. Zhao Mu leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. Yi Xian waved at Zhao Mu, chuckling, so it's Miss Zhao. I almost didn't recognize you when you wore your clothes. Speaking up to hear, he suddenly froze. What did he say? At this time, Zhao Mu, who was not far away, suddenly opened her eyes. The next moment, she disappeared. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. His arms fiercely blocked in front of him. Bang! With a muffled sound, Yi Xian directly retreated hundreds of zhang. Zhao Mu wanted to make another move, but at this time, a voice sounded from inside the hall. Girl, Zhao Mu stopped. She glanced at Yi Xian, who was not far away, and then raised her fist. Yi Xian smiled awkwardly, it's a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything else. I just spoke too quickly. Zhao Mu ignored Yi Xian. She retreated to the side, continuing to lean against the wall. Not far away, a man suddenly looked at Yi Xian, you're Yi Xian? Yi Xian looked over. The one who spoke was a burly man. The man's figure was extremely burly. His muscles bulged, filled with explosive power. Yi Xian nodded, that's me. The man sized up Yi Xian, I think you're just a pretty boy. Why did Master say you're very powerful? Pretty boy? Himself? Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this time, a voice sounded from inside the hall, come in. Yi Xian cupped his fists at the burly man, then walked into the hall. There were 5 people in the hall. Among them, the Star Lord was the leader. He also knew one of them. It was Tang Yen. As for the others, they were the Demon King, the Southern Sect's Martial Master, and Perfected Chu. After Yi Xian walked into the hall, he slightly bowed to Tang Yen and the others, greetings, seniors. Yi Xian bowed. This caused Tang Yen and the others to be slightly taken aback. Bowing? The Star Lord glanced at Yi Xian, but did not speak. At this time, the Southern Sect's Martial Master laughed, it's indeed rare to have such strength at such a young age. Yi Xian slightly bowed, Senior, you flatter me. Compared to Senior's disciple, this junior is far inferior. The Southern Sect's Martial Master laughed, you're quite humble. At the side, Perfected Chu suddenly said, what do you think about the Kingdom of God's invasion? Hearing this, the gazes of everyone present descended onto Yi Xian. The Star Lord silently looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. The atmosphere in the surroundings had become slightly strange. Words that struck a chord. Just as Tang Qing had said, they hoped to obtain Yi Xian's help, but they were afraid of Yi Xian. They were afraid that he would join the Kingdom of God's side because of the alliance of order. Once Yi Xian joined the Kingdom of God's side, it would definitely be extremely disadvantageous to them. Therefore, to them, Yi Xian was either on their side or be killed to prevent him from betraying them. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "What else can I think about when the Kingdom of God is invading? Of course, I'll kill them." Perfected Chu looked at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian continued, "Everyone, I am the Dean of Wuyuan, the sect leader of the Sword Sect, and now the city lord of Shenwu City. Since the Kingdom of God is invading, how can I escape unscathed? Therefore, my idea is to kill them." But at this point, he suddenly stopped. Perfected Chu asked, "But what?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "I'm afraid." Perfected Chu frowned slightly, "Afraid of the Kingdom of God?" Yi Xian shook his head and said, "Afraid of the alliance of order." Perfected Chu glanced at the nearby Star Lord and did not speak. The Star Lord's expression was calm and did not speak. Yi Xian said again, "Everyone, I'm afraid that when I fight with you against the Kingdom of God, the alliance of order will stab me in the back. What should I do?" Perfected Chu smiled, "Before the Kingdom of God arrives, we don't care about any grievances. But now that the Kingdom of God is invading, we must unite." When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at the Star Lord. "You're probably thinking the same, right?" The Star Lord spoke indifferently, "Actually, all of you should be worried that he will side with the Kingdom of God. If he does, and he's skilled in assassination. The art of assassination." The expressions of everyone here changed slightly when they heard this. Besides the 5 of them, no other saint would be able to suppress Yi Xian's strength. Moreover, if he were to assassinate Chen Shi, then even those saints would probably be unable to stop him. Because Yi Xian had a precious treasure in his possession right now. Yi Xian suddenly started laughing. The Demon King suddenly said, "What are you laughing at?" Yi Xian laughed, "I'm laughing at the Kingdom of God. They haven't even attacked us, but we're about to face internal strife." As he spoke, he glanced at the others, "Everyone, all of you should be aware of the enmity between me and the Alliance of Order. In order to kill me, the Alliance of Order didn't hesitate to send an army to Divine Martial City to capture my younger sister. How old is she? She's just a little girl, but the Alliance of Order actually did such a despicable thing." When he spoke up to this point, he pointed angrily at the Star Lord and said fiercely, "You think you're the strongest in this world? You're worse than a dog for your actions. I'm looking down on you." The Star Lord's eyes narrowed slightly. In the next moment, a powerful pressure directly crushed down towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled coldly. With a flip of his right hand, the executing heaven sword appeared in his hand, and then he raised his hand and slashed down. Chi! The pressure was directly shattered by the sword, but Yi Xian retreated to the entrance of the hall. The Star Lord was about to attack again when he seemed to have thought of something and looked at Perfected Master Chu. "Brother Chu, did you see that? It's not that the Alliance of Order doesn't want to consider the overall situation, but he doesn't." Perfected Master Chu looked at Yi Xian, "I've always thought that you're a smart person, but now it seems that I'm wrong." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I know. You called me here because you want to see my attitude. If I am smart enough to be your sword to deal with the divine nation, you will spare my life. Otherwise, if I am not smart enough, you will kill me to get rid of the trouble in the future." Speaking up to here, he looked at Spiritual Master Chu, "If you want me to go against the God nation, I can, but there are 2 requirements. First, the experts of the Order Alliance who attacked my martial institution and sword sect must die. Second, the Star Lord must go to my Divine Martial City and apologize to the tombstones of my martial institution's dean and sword sect master. If that's the case, I can temporarily put aside my grudge with the Alliance of Order." Hearing this, the Star Lord was expressionless, but his eyes were full of sarcasm. Beside him, Tang Yen also shook his head, unable to conceal the disappointment in his eyes. Perfected Master Chu looked at Yi Xian, then you might be disappointed. As he spoke, deep in his eyes, there was already killing intent. Yi Xian nodded, everyone, let's do it. As he spoke, he turned to look at the sky and said softly, Master, this disciple is unlucky, I can't go to the 5th dimension to play chess with you. 5th dimension. Hearing this, everyone's expression instantly changed. P.S. Recommend a book that's only second to my good-looking friend, Changning Imperial Army, also published by Jianghu. Friends who are lacking in books can go read it. It's equivalent to a historical fantasy, very good. This month's 3rd update, the monthly votes are a little more, but there are some trolls. These trolls' words have caused devastating damage to my young heart. If I scold him, he'll say, damn, this is an author? Such an uncultured author, actually scolding people, is he worthy to write a book? I found out that trolls have double standards. They use the standards of saints to treat others, and use the standards of bitches to treat themselves. I know that some readers will say, if a dog bites you, will you bite back? Little do they know that this is what the trolls think. They think, I bite you, why don't you bite me? After saying so much, it's time to get to the main topic. There are 2 titles for the next book, everyone help me refer to, The Invincible Troll, and The Troll is Supreme. Which one does everyone think is better? Chapter 596. The 5th Dimension. The Planet Lord and the others looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. That was a world from a higher dimension. Even at their level, they still didn't know anything about the 5th dimension. At this moment, Tang Yen suddenly said, Little friend Yi, your master is from the 5th dimension? Yi Xian turned to look at Tang Yen and nodded. He said he came from the 5th dimension. Sigh, I don't know if it's true. Tang Yen hesitated for a moment, then said, the treasure you have was also given to you by your master? Yi Xian nodded. When I was in Qingcheng, I was still an ordinary disciple of the Yi family. One day, I met a white-bearded grandpa. He said that I was a 1-in-a-million sword genius and that the important task of fighting against the 5th dimension calamity would depend on me in the future. From then on, I began to cultivate the sword. Tang Yen glanced at Yi Xian. This sounded like nonsense no matter how he thought about it. At this moment, the Demon King suddenly said, You said that your master is from the 5th dimension. Do you have any proof? Yi Xian said, Does the 5th dimension treasure count? The Demon King pondered for a moment, then said, Is there anything else? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then nodded. The Demon King said, Can I take a look? Yi Xian glanced at the Planet Lord not far away and said indifferently, Let him out. Demon King, Tang Yan's expression was a little strange. This was too vengeful. The Planet Lord looked at Yi Xian. You have to understand whose territory this is. Yi Xian said indifferently, If I were you, I wouldn't even look at it if you begged me to. Can't you have some backbone? The Planet Lord narrowed his eyes, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, Yi Xian sneered. Planet Lord, do you still remember the never-ending starfield? Do you still remember how your avatar disappeared? Do you still remember how countless experts from the starfield disappeared? Hearing this, the Planet Lord's expression changed. How could he forget what happened in the never-ending starfield? That time, his avatar went but was instantly killed by that man. Not only that, but all the experts who went were instantly killed by that man. Not only the Planet Lord, but the faces of spiritual Master Chu and the others also darkened. Naturally, they knew a little about the never-ending starfield. He only knew that the Star Lord had sent some experts from the star field, but all of them had perished in the end. Yi Xian suddenly said, Do you know who that person is? That is my 10th senior brother, and before me, there are 9 senior brothers. As he spoke, he flipped his right hand and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. This is the soul-suppressing sword that the Nether King gave me back then. You should have heard of the Nether King before, so I won't explain any further. With that said, the soul-suppressing sword in his hand turned into the God King's sword. This was gifted to me by the God King. Have you heard of the Protoss? The most monstrous genius of the Protoss, Jian Zizai, is my sister. You should have heard of her, right? With that, he waved his right hand and the God King's throne appeared before him. Dao Realm Treasure. Seeing the God King's throne, the 5 people in the hall became serious. Yi Xian pointed at the God King's throne. This was given to me by the God King. He said that I am the 5th dimension's heaven's chosen one. He told me not to forget the God race when I become rich in the future. As he said this, he opened his palm and the executing heaven's sword appeared. Seeing this sword, the few people in the hall were moved, especially the planet lord. There was a hint of wariness in his eyes. Because he'd personally experienced the might of this sword. Yi Xian said calmly, "Do you know what sword this is?" Tang Yen asked, "What sword?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Executing Heaven's sword. This sword is a 5th dimension treasure because it is from the 5th dimension. Therefore, once it appears in our 4th dimension, it will damage the origin of our 4th dimension." Executing Heaven's sword. Spiritual Master Chu looked at the executing Heaven's sword and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "I have another sword. It is my master's sword. Take a look." As he said this, he asked Xiao Linger to bring out a sword from the top of the pagoda. When they saw this sword, the expressions of the people in the hall changed instantly. Fear. At this moment, the 5 people's eyes were filled with fear. Xiao Linger raised the sword and waved it at the crowd. Then, he turned and returned to the prison pagoda. Yi Xian said, "Everyone, this is my master's sword. He left it to me. He said that unless my life is in danger, I cannot use this sword easily." The Demon King asked, "Why?" Yi Xian said seriously, "Master said that once this sword is used, it will destroy the heavens and earth. Our universe will not be able to withstand it." "Everyone," Yi Xian put away all the treasures and said, "Everyone, these are my treasures. If you make a move now, they will all be yours, including the 5th dimension treasure." Everyone was silent. 5th dimension treasure. The people in the hall were the strongest people in this world. Their intelligence was naturally not low. They also doubted what Yi Xian said, but the treasures that Yi Xian took out were more terrifying than the previous one. Especially the last sword, it made them feel danger. A sword could make them feel danger. One could imagine how terrifying the owner of the sword was. Moreover, the origins of Yi Xian's treasures were not ordinary. Under normal circumstances, how could a person have so many treasures? In short, this Yi Xian was not simple. At this moment, Spiritual Master Chu suddenly sighed. "Little friend, we don't have any other intentions. If we had other intentions, we would have attacked you from the start. We just want to invite you to fight against God Nation with us, that's all." Tang Yen also nodded slightly. "Little friendy, we don't have any thoughts about you now. We just want to invite you to fight against God Nation together. If we don't stop God Nation's army, once they come, who knows how many people will die. This battle is a battle of justice, for ourselves and for the people of the world." The Demon King also said, "No matter what grudges we have in the past, we still need to join forces now. This God Nation is not an ordinary force." Spiritual Master Chu nodded slightly. "If little friend joins us, our chances of winning against God Nation will definitely increase by a lot." This sentence was not an exaggeration. Yi Xian's strength was really strong. Moreover, Yi Xian had so many treasures. With this kind of battle strength, ordinary Dao realm experts were completely unable to deal with him. Yi Xian glanced at the Celestial Lord not far away and did not speak. At this moment, the Celestial Lord suddenly said, "Yi Xian, if you want me to apologize in front of your Wuyuan's Dean and Sword sect leader's grave, I can. However, I will not let you kill the people of my Order Alliance. If we win against God Nation, then we can settle the grudges between you and my Order Alliance. If we lose, then everyone will die in God Burial Plain, and all the grudges will be over. How about it? Yi Xian was a little surprised. He was surprised that the Celestial Lord would compromise. In the hall, everyone was looking at Yi Xian. After a while, Yi Xian said, "Let's go to Jianghu City to apologize." After saying that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian was not an idiot. He knew that if he pushed his luck, these people would definitely not give in. But now, what did he, Wu Yuan, and Sword Sect need? They needed time. He needed time to become stronger. Strong to the point where even these 6 people couldn't do anything to him. The 6 people in front of him couldn't do anything to him, and the martial institution and sword faction also needed time to develop. Soon, Yi Xian, the Celestial Lord, and the others arrived at Jianghu City. In the back mountain of Sword Sect, in front of the tombstone of Yu Wuchen, the Celestial Lord looked at the tombstone silently. Not far behind him were all the disciples of Sword Sect. All the disciples of Sword Sect were looking at the Celestial Lord, and their eyes were filled with rage and killing intent. Meanwhile, the Celestial Lord bowed slightly to the tombstone, and then he turned around to gaze at Yi Xian. "Remember what you promised." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Yi Xian remained silent for a short while, and then he turned around to gaze at the disciples of Sword Sect. Remember, this isn't something to be proud of. Conversely, it's because of our incompetence. Because of our incompetence, we had no choice but to make him come here to apologize. However, I guarantee that I'll definitely make the Order Alliance pay with blood in the future. All the disciples of Sword Sect were looking at Yi Xian, and their eyes were filled with respect. The disciples of Sword Sect were extremely convinced by Yi Xian. Yi Xian continued, "Remember, if my Sword Sect isn't strong, then it can only be bullied and humiliated by others in the future. Whether my Sword Sect is strong or not depends on all of you. All of you are the future of the Sword Sect." The Sword Sect. Actually, he didn't really want to be the sect master of the Sword Sect, but he had no choice. Since he'd chosen to be the sect master, then he would do it well. After the disciples of the Sword Sect left, Tang Qing suddenly walked over to Yi Xian's side and spoke softly. "Do you know why the Celestial Lord made a compromise?" Yi Xian shook his head. Tang Qing replied, "Because compared to killing you, he would rather defeat the Divine Kingdom, bring back Gu Taishan's corpse, and wash away the years of humiliation the Order Alliance suffered. Moreover, he knows that the Divine Kingdom is definitely extremely formidable, so the chances of that happening are very slim. However, if you join us, then perhaps that chance will increase slightly." Yi Xian spoke solemnly. "Exactly how strong is the Divine Kingdom?" Tang Qing shook her head. "I don't know." Yi Xian asked, "Even the Tang clan doesn't know?" Tang Qing nodded. "No, because no one has been able to set foot in the Divine Kingdom. We've sent people there before, but no one came back alive." Yi Xian fell silent. Tang Qing said softly, "The Celestial Lord has already gathered all the forces apart from the Eastern Wasteland domain to head to the Divine Burial Plains, including the geniuses on the lower rank. These people are all heading there, including me. I will head there tomorrow." Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "None of you have a choice?" Tang Qing shook her head. "No choice." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" "Because of the 5 supreme experts." Tang Qing chuckled. "They have no choice either." Yi Xian frowned. "What do you mean?" Tang Qing looked at Yi Xian. "Do you know who the real master of the Divine Tao Army is?" Yi Xian said, "Isn't it you?" Tang Qing shook her head. She looked up at the sky and said softly, "The true master of the Divine Tao Lord is it, the Tendo. Actually, there's another reason why the Divine Kingdom is fighting with us, apart from our own interests. It's also the most important reason, and that is the fight for orthodoxy." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "You mean, 2 heavens' ways?" Tang Qing nodded. "The Tendo that the Divine Kingdom believes in is different from the Tendo that we believe in. Although they've never truly appeared, they've always been there. Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian. Of course, we fight for our own interests. Take you for example. You're the city lord of the divine martial city, but if the divine kingdom attacks, you have to bow down. Are you willing? Don't even think about surrendering. Most of the time, surrendering doesn't end well. Yi Xian said softly, why do I feel that all living beings are like chess pieces? Chapter 597. Yi Xian looked at the sky. How big was the universe? He did not know. When he was in Qing City, he felt that the country of Jianghu was very big, but when he came to the Azure world, he realized how small the country of Jianghu was. When he came here, he realized how small the Azure world was, and in this vast universe, was the chaotic universe the only universe? What about outside the chaotic universe? 5 dimensions? The universe was too big. It was so big that he could only use the word too big to describe it, because he had no concept of this universe. Compared to the vast universe, all living beings were too insignificant. All living beings were like ants. Looking at it from another angle, this sentence was actually not unreasonable. Humans and other living beings were really like ants in this vast universe. At this moment, when he heard Tang Qing's words, he suddenly had a feeling. All living beings were like chess pieces on a chessboard. How they moved and how they would end up was already determined. After an ordinary person was born, they would study, work, get married, have children, grow old, and die. And their children would continue like this, and the cycle would repeat, and cultivators cultivated, became stronger, the great Tao, and lived forever. But how many true immortals were there? The great Tao, the great Tao, the great Tao, these were so illusory. And many people spent their entire lives cultivating, but in the end, they would only end up like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It was as if everything was already determined. At this moment, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Tang Qing looked at Yi Xian. What are you smiling at? Yi Xian smiled and said, no matter how big this vast universe is, no matter how long we can live, the most important thing is the meaning of life. We came to this world, and one day we will disappear, but we must live a wonderful life. And working hard and cultivating with all our might is to have a good life, for example, to be able to eat what we want to eat, to be able to love the person we want to love, to live a life that is not petty, and that is enough for our loved ones. Tang Qing looked at Yi Xian in a daze. Meanwhile, Yu suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw Yu. Why is she here again? Yu looked at Yi Xian. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Yi Xian, making Yi Xian feel very uncomfortable. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Yu suddenly said, I once read a sentence in one of Master's books. Master said, the meaning of life is to realize one's own value and strive to live every day to the fullest. At this point, she looked at Yi Xian and said, it seems to be the same as what you said. Yi Xian said seriously, great minds think alike. Miss Yu, if you don't mind, you can treat me as your master for the time being. I don't mind, really. Yu suddenly punched out. Bang! Before Yi Xian could react, he was sent flying. Yu waved his hand. You really deserve a beating. With that, she turned around and disappeared. Tang Qing, in the following time, Yi Xian began to make arrangements for the sword sect and Wu Yuan because he decided to go to God Burial Plain. It could be said that he had to go. If he chose not to go, those 5 people would definitely not let him go, nor would they let Divine Martial City go. However, this time, he was only bringing Mo-Xia. And Lanxiu and Lian Wanli stayed in Divine Martial City to oversee it. After all, there were no super experts in Divine Martial City. The next day, Yi Xian, Mo-Xia, and Tang Qing left Divine Martial City for God Burial Plain. When they learned that Yi Xian had left Divine Martial City and was going to God Burial Plain, Enlightened Master Chu and the others heaved a sigh of relief. They were worried that Yi Xian would stay here. They were also afraid that Yi Xian would stab them in the back when they fought against Divine Nation. Once the 5 of them went to God Burial Plain, no one would be able to stop Yi Xian. Fortunately, Yi Xian was willing to go to God Burial Plain. Under the summons of the Order Alliance, Tang Clan, and Demon Race, countless experts went to God Burial Plain. Because no one dared to not go, those who did not would become the enemies of these 3 factions. Moreover, once they went to the God Burial Plains, they would be rewarded with extremely tempting rewards if they could contribute to the God Burial Plains. These rewards were jointly created by the 3 great factions, and among them were cultivation methods, martial techniques, and even creation realm treasures. With great rewards, there would always be brave men. More and more experts went to God Burial Plain. In these people's minds, they all wanted to contribute and make a name for themselves. And no one knew anything about Divine Nation. Qin Clan. On this day, the Star Lord and the others arrived above the Qin Clan. However, the Qin Clan was already empty, not a single person was there. In the air, Enlightened Master Chu looked down at the Qin Clan and said softly, Divine Nation was probably behind them. The Star Lord nodded, Divine Nation's strength has already infiltrated our side. We need to be extremely careful. Enlightened Master Chu looked at the distant horizon and said softly, let's go to God Burial Plain. Soon, the 5 of them disappeared. God Burial Plain. To the east of God Burial Plain was Divine Nation, and to the west was the Great Wall of Mountains. This Great Wall of Mountains was made up of countless mountains. The city wall was built against the mountains and was hundreds of meters tall, facing Divine Nation from afar. If Divine Nation wanted to conquer the other 3 desolate worlds, they first had to trample over this Great Wall. A day later, Yi Xian and Mo Xia arrived at the Great Wall of Mountains. As soon as they arrived at the Great Wall of Mountains, a Divine Path soldier riding a giant dragon appeared above them. The Divine Path soldier looked down at Yi Xian and Mo Xia. Who are you? Yi Xian said, Yi Xian, the Lord of the Holy Martial Arts City. Shenwu City. The God Dao soldier frowned, so young? Yi Xian smiled, too outstanding. I can't help it. Mo Xia shook his head and smiled. With Yi Xian's shamelessness, no one would dare to say they were first. The soldier paused, clearly not expecting Yi Xian to say that. He sized up Yi Xian and said, come with me. Then, he gestured for Yi Xian and Mo Xia to get on the giant dragon. Yi Xian and Mo Xia did not refuse and flew on the giant dragon. Soon, the giant dragon disappeared into the horizon. Looking down from the sky, they could see thousands of mountains. On the giant dragon's back, Mo Xia looked down at the mountains and said softly, Brother Yi, I did something on my own and forgot to tell you. Yi Xian looked at Mo Xia, who said, I sent a message back to the never-ending starfield. I asked some geniuses from my clan to come to Shenwu City. I hope they will stay here. Yi Xian smiled, isn't that a good thing? Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian and said softly, thank you. Yi Xian shook his head, this is too distant between brothers. Brother. Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian and nodded, Brother Yi is a person worth befriending. Yi Xian said with a smile, did you just realize that? Ha. Mo Xia smiled too. Yi Xian suddenly said, Brother Mo Xia, do you have any dreams? Mo Xia thought for a while and said, I hope my clansmen can have a good place to stay and not be bullied. Yi Xian said softly, it's very difficult. Mo Xia nodded, it is. Right at this moment, the nearby God Dao soldier suddenly said, the 2 of you are here. Then, the giant dragon stopped. There was a mountain not far in front of the 2. The divine Dao soldier pointed at the mountain and said, this is the Sky Trampling Peak, named after Senior Gu Tian Trampling. It is also the main peak of the Great Wall, and there is a grand hall on this peak called the Sky Trampling Hall. You 2 have just arrived, so you must report to the deputy commander there. I have a mission to complete, so I can't keep you company. Farewell. Then, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon on the giant dragon. When Yi Xian and Mo Xia arrived at the front of the hall, a man in armor and a saber at his waist stood in front of Yi Xian and Mo Xia. Yi Xian said, "Please inform the city lord of Jianghu City that Yi Xian is here to report." The armored man glanced at Yi Xian and left. After a while, he came out again and looked at Yi Xian and Mo Xia. "Wait. Wait." Yi Xian asked, "How long?" The armored man said, "Wait." Yi Xian frowned. He thought for a moment and nodded, "Let's wait then." Then, he and Mo Xia walked to the side. From their position, they could see the Great Wall. The Great Wall was like a giant dragon circling between the mountains. It was a spectacular sight. God Burial Plain was right in front of them, and the entire God Burial Plain was endless. And at the end of it was the legendary divine nation. At this moment, Mo Xia suddenly said, "Let's go take a look." Go take a look. Yi Xian looked at Mo Xia, "To the divine nation?" Mo Xia nodded. Yi Xian asked, "Why do you want to go take a look all of a sudden?" Mo Xia said softly, "I just want to see how powerful this divine nation is." Yi Xian chuckled, "I also want to go take a look, but I'm afraid of death." He definitely wouldn't underestimate the divine nation. What a joke, this nation almost unified the entire chaotic universe. Moreover, the 5 Star Lords were very wary of this mysterious nation. If even such an expert was so wary, how could the other party be weak? At this moment, Yi Xian said again, "However, it shouldn't be a problem for us to go take a look and come back, right?" Mo Xia nodded, "It shouldn't be a problem." The two glanced at each other, and in the next moment, they disappeared. On the spot, the armored man, not long after Yi Xian and Mo Xia left, Daoist Chu's group of 5 appeared in front of the heaven-trampling palace. This time, the armored man didn't dare to stop them. The 5 entered the palace directly. Just as they entered the palace, a middle-aged man wearing black armor walked out. The middle-aged man bowed slightly to the 5. Divine Lord Deputy Commander Chu Kuang greets seniors. Daoist Chu said, "Commander Chu, is that Yi Xian here?" Yi Xian? Chu Kuang was slightly stunned, then looked outside the palace. Guards. As soon as the voice fell, the armored man outside the palace appeared. Chu Kuang said, "Is Yi Xian still here?" The armored man replied, reporting to Commander, "The 2 of them have just left." Chu Kuang frowned slightly, "Where did they go?" The armored man said, "I don't know, but they went in the direction of God Burial Plain." Hearing this, Chu Zhen and the others' expressions changed instantly. Chu Zhen said solemnly, "This guy is definitely going to the divine nation. Isn't he courting death?" Tang Yen also frowned slightly, "Rash." The Demon King shook his head, "Too young." At this moment, the Star-Lord said calmly, "What are you all worried about?" Everyone looked at the Star-Lord, who was expressionless. "Don't worry, this person is not only strong, his skin is thicker than the city wall. He won't die." Chapter 598. Desolate. When Yi Xian and Mo Xia entered the God Burial Plain, their first impression was that it was desolate. The ground was barren, and the sky was gray. There was a heavy sense of oppression. The two didn't openly enter the God Burial Plain. Right now, both of them were using chaotic energy to conceal their auras. Ordinary experts couldn't detect them. On the way, Mo Xia suddenly asked, "Brother Yi, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing for God Nation to unify the entire chaotic universe?" Yi Xian was silent. "Good thing? Bad thing?" Yi Xian said softly, "For our generation, it's definitely not a good thing. Because once war is started, people will die. No one will be able to escape unscathed. But for future generations, it might be a bad thing, but it might also be a good thing." Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian, "What do you mean?" Yi Xian smiled. If they unify the chaotic universe, then there won't be any more wars, at least not in the short term. And if God Nation's divine master is a wise divine master, then it's definitely a good thing for future generations. But if the other party is a cruel and heartless tyrant, then it's undoubtedly a disaster for future generations. Mo Xia nodded. What if the other party is a wise divine master? Yi Xian said with a smile. How many wars are waged for the sake of the common people? Most of them are just for their own ambitions. Moreover, once God Nation succeeds, the factions within God Nation will divide up the territories of the other wastelands, such as my Shenwu city. When that time comes, they want my Shenwu city to surrender. Should I surrender or not? In any case, with my hot temper, I definitely won't surrender. I'll definitely do it for them. Mo Xia nodded. I also don't want to put my hopes on others. Yi Xian looked at the end of the god burial plain. Since ancient times, the defeated side has never had a good ending. If he was alone, it wouldn't matter to him whether God Nation attacked or not. But now, he wasn't alone. He, Yi Xian, was the city lord of Divine Martial City. Before Wu Wen and Yu Wuchen died, they had entrusted Wu Yuan and the Sword Sect to him. Naturally, he had to think for Wu Yuan and the Sword Sect. Perhaps worldly affairs would cause him to be tied down, but in his opinion, as a man, he had to take responsibility. This was his responsibility, and he had to take it well. People shouldn't just live for themselves. At this time, Mo Xia suddenly said, "Look." Yi Xian raised his head and looked over. Not far away, there was an iron pillar. A man was tied to the iron pillar. The man's face was covered by his hair, making it impossible to see his true appearance. Mo Xia said softly, "He must be Gu Tatian from the Lawful Order Alliance." Yi Xian nodded. He looked around. It was deserted. There was no one around. But Yi Xian knew that things weren't that simple. Otherwise, the Lawful Order Alliance would have taken Gu Tatian's corpse away. Mo Xia suddenly looked at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, should we keep going?" Yi Xian looked into the distance. He still couldn't see God Nation. He had a bad feeling about this. Yi Xian shook his head. "We have to go back." With his current strength, apart from the Star Lord and the others, no one else was a threat to him. But he wouldn't be arrogant. He wouldn't dare to be arrogant. It was better not to act recklessly now. He was a little fed up with the days of being hunted down. Mo Xia nodded. He too had a bad feeling about this. Just as the two were about to leave, footsteps were heard from the right. Mo Xia and Yi Xian frowned slightly. Yi Xian turned around and saw an old man slowly walking towards them from not far away. The old man was thin and had a hunched back. He had very little hair and looked like a rabbit. In his hand was a pitch-black wooden staff. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and Mo Xia. "You're from the Great Wall?" His voice was hoarse and uncomfortable, as if there was phlegm in his throat. Mo Xia was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "No, we're from God Nation." Mo Xia, the old man looked at Yi Xian. "Look at me carefully." Yi Xian sized up the old man. "What do you mean, senior?" The old man looked at Yi Xian. "Do I look like an idiot to you?" Yi Xian, the old man suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian was about to attack when Mo Xia suddenly said, "Let me do it." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly charged forward swiftly. In the next moment, an afterimage flashed through the battlefield. Chi! Mo Xia's body tore through space and slammed into the old man. Boom! An explosion suddenly rang out. Immediately after, the two of them retreated rapidly. As they retreated, Mo Xia pointed forward with a finger. 100 meters away, the space where the old man was exploded. At the same time, Mo Xia suddenly appeared in front of the old man. A powerful force instantly pushed the old man back 100 meters. So powerful. Not far away, Yi Xian was a little shocked by what he saw. He hadn't fought Mo Xia recently. Thus, He still thought Wuxia's strength was still at the never-ending star field. He didn't expect Wuxia to be this powerful now. Wuxia's battle strength was definitely stronger than Dao vindication experts. He wasn't the only one growing. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked into the distance. At this moment, Wuxia and the old man were evenly matched, and the old man was definitely a peak Dao vindication expert. Just at this moment, not far away, Wuxia and the old man suddenly retreated rapidly. The two of them retreated 100 meters before stopping at almost the same time. After stopping, Wuxia's right foot lightly stomped, and his body floated into the air. In the air, his palm lightly pressed forward. Instantly, a black whirlpool condensed in his palm. Very quickly, the space within 1,000 meters around him began to tremble. Below, the old man narrowed his eyes. He slowly clenched his right hand and a powerful force silently condensed in his hand. In the air, Wuxia suddenly flipped his palm downwards. In an instant, a powerful force suddenly surged out from the surrounding space. This force was so powerful that it felt like the sky was collapsing. The surrounding space twisted into a strange shape. Not far away, the old man angrily roared and threw a punch upwards. Using force to break force. Rumble. The surrounding space suddenly shook violently. In the next moment, a figure retreated rapidly. It was the old man. The old man retreated hundreds of meters before stopping. At the corner of his mouth, a smear of blood slowly seeped out. The old man stared at Wuxia. He was about to attack, but at this moment, an afterimage suddenly appeared behind the old man. In the next moment, the afterimage appeared in front of Wuxia. Wuxia's expression slightly changed and he slammed his palm down. Rumble. The moment Wuxia's palm landed, his entire body flew out. In front of him, the afterimage closely chased after him like a ghost. It was extremely fast, and waves of powerful energy constantly bombarded Wuxia. In the air, Wuxia retreated rapidly. After retreating 1,000 meters, Wuxia suddenly roared and pressed his hands forward. Rumble. The space in front of him instantly crumbled. At this moment, the afterimage had unknowingly retreated in front of the old man. It was a young man wearing a blue and white robe. The young man was skinny and had a faint smile on his face. Yi Xian's expression was rather serious because this young man's speed was way too fast. In that instant, Wuxia was suppressed by this young man's speed. And this young man's speed was something even he couldn't deal with. Without a doubt, this was a genius from Divine Nation. At this moment, the young man suddenly glanced at Yi Xian and Wuxia. Are the geniuses from the West all as weak as you two? Yi Xian asked, you think you're very strong? The young man lightly patted the messy clothes on his chest and said indifferently, in my Divine Nation, I'm definitely at the bottom. But in front of the two of you, I think I'm very strong. No, I'm very strong because you two are too weak. I'm not deliberately targeting you two. I'm just stating the facts. Yi Xian sternly said, I don't believe it. Only if you stand and receive my sword. Wuxia. The young man looked at Yi Xian with a bit of surprise, you're a swordsman. Yi Xian nodded, swordsman. On my side, I'm ranked 9th among the swordsmen. How about it? Do you dare to stand and receive my sword? If you receive my sword without retreating, I'll admit that you're strong. The young man sized up Yi Xian, who's the number 1 swordsman on your side? Yi Xian sternly said, Yi Xian. The young man frowned, he's very strong. Yi Xian nodded with an extremely serious expression and a trace of worship, very strong. Not only is he strong, but he's also handsome and has an imposing appearance. He can be said to be the number 1 man in history. On my side, countless women would never marry for him, and countless men would feel ashamed of their inferiority upon seeing him. Wuxia glanced at Yi Xian and couldn't help but walk a few meters to the side. He lowered his head in embarrassment. Opposite Yi Xian, the young man frowned, Yi Xian? Is he a transcendent sword saint or a sword god? The corner of Yi Xian's eyes twitched. He thought for a moment, then said, 5 years ago, he was already a transcendent sword god. But now? At this point, he didn't continue. Transcendent sword god. Not far away, the young man frowned. So strong? Yi Xian nodded, very strong. At this point, he looked at the young man. How about it? Do you dare to stand and receive my sword? If you receive it, I'll admit defeat. If not, pretend I didn't say anything. The young man said lightly, are you trying to provoke me? Yi Xian was about to speak, but the young man suddenly smiled. It's fine, I'll receive your sword. Let me see what kind of strength this swordsman who is ranked 9th in the West is. Behind the young man, the old man suddenly said, don't underestimate your opponent. The young man smiled, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. It's just a swordsman who is ranked 9th, he can't hurt me. Not far away, Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, let me make it clear first, you might die if I attack you with my sword. The young man laughed, is that so? Come, let me have a look. Yi Xian walked in front of the young man, a sword suddenly appeared in his hand, the next moment, he suddenly slashed. When he saw the sword in Yi Xian's hand, the young man's expression instantly changed. He was about to retreat, but at this time, Yi Xian's sword had already descended. It was too late to retreat, he had to raise his arms to block. Chi! The sword slashed down, and the young man's arms were directly cut off. Not only that, the young man's body was instantly shattered. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was the executing heaven sword. How could the body resist the executing heaven sword? Yi Xian looked at the young man who was in soul form not far away, and said sincerely, Your Excellency is really strong, you can actually resist my sword, I'm impressed, I've lost. We'll meet again someday. After saying that, he turned around and ran. Behind him, the young man suddenly roared, How dare you use a Dao realm sword, despicable, shameless, ah! P.S. Life and death are indifferent, if you're not convinced, just spit it out. Thank you to all the readers who silently supported, those who silently supported, those who silently voted. Why aren't you saying anything? Come out and have a chat. I'm lonely. I'm so empty. I want. Chapter 599. Meanwhile, the young man's expression was unsightly to the extreme. He knew that he'd been tricked the moment Yi Xian attacked. The sword in Yi Xian's hand was at least at the Dao realm, and it was definitely not something that a fleshly body could endure. The old man sighed lightly. He hadn't expected that there would be such a vicious swordsman in the world. At this moment, the young man and the old man suddenly looked to the right. Not far away, there was a young girl riding a white horse. Starlight sparkled beneath the white horse's feet. A galactic colt. A Dao realm demon beast. The young woman wore a floral dress, her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she had bangs on both sides of her forehead. There was a saber on the left side of her waist and a wine gourd on the right. The young man's expression suddenly became solemn when he saw the young woman. The young woman picked up the wine gourd on her waist and took 2 sips, and then she gave the young man a thumbs up before quickly turning around. The young man's expression was quite unsightly, but he didn't dare to respond. Meanwhile, the young woman suddenly patted the galactic colt she rode lightly. A moment later, the galactic colt vanished into the distance, and an expanse of specks of starlight appeared behind it like a river of stars. Yi Xian and Xia were dashing madly towards the end of the horizon. They were heading back to the Great Wall. The reason Yi Xian did not follow up with another attack was that he had no way to do so. After all, that was the territory of the Kingdom of God. Moreover, he'd sensed a powerful aura approaching him. He didn't hesitate at all. Run. A wise man doesn't fight when the odds are against him. Meanwhile, Ayu's voice suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind, you have to make a trip to that Kingdom of God. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, why? Ah, you spoke solemnly, I sense the Tao laws on the 6th floor. Yi Xian asked, in the kingdom of God? Ah, you replied, isn't that obvious? Go to the kingdom of God? Yi Xian was slightly hesitant. That place was definitely a forbidden place. Even though he was confident in his concealment technique, it was the kingdom of God. Who knew what kind of experts there were over there? Meanwhile, you suddenly said, you have to make a trip there. You forcefully utilized that damned pagoda in the Order Alliance earlier, and it affected the pagoda greatly. If I hadn't suppressed it, then you would be finished by now. Prison pagoda. Only now did Yi Xian remember that this broken pagoda hadn't come out recently. Ah, you continued, the fourth floor's Dao Law is extremely helpful to you right now. If you can obtain it, it can make up for the flaws in your body. Yi Xian asked, what kind of Dao Law is the sixth floor? Aiwa said, you'll know when the time comes. Yi Xian was speechless. Ah, you continued, make a trip there as soon as possible. It's best if these Dao laws don't fall into the hands of outsiders. Moreover, with these Dao laws, not only will your own strength be greatly increased, you will also be able to better control this broken tower. Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Divine Kingdom. Since there were Dao laws there, then he had to enter even if it was a dragon's lair or a tiger's lair. Ah, you continued, besides that, you have to improve your cultivation as well. Your current cultivation is too low. If you're able to improve it to the Dao realm, then you'll notice that you'll be able to improve the might of these Dao laws to an extremely terrifying degree. Increase my cultivation. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Actually, the sword sect had creation rank swords, but he wasn't willing to devour them. Because the sword sect was too poor right now. The reason it was naturally because the sword sect and Wu Yuan had utilized those grand formations. They only had that little bit of resources left. If he were to devour them, then the disciples of the sword sect wouldn't even have a single good sword in the future. So, he had to think of another way to obtain the swords. A moment later, Yi Xian and Mo Xia arrived at the gates of the Great Wall of 10,000 Mountains. At this moment, Yi Xian and Mo Xia suddenly stopped. The next moment, both of them turned around abruptly. At this moment, a flash of saber light appeared in front of them without any warning. Yi Xian unsheathed his sword and slashed. Mo Xia smashed his fist forward. Bang! The saber light shattered, but Mo Xia and Yi Xian retreated rapidly at the same time. With this retreat, the two of them retreated directly to the front of the city gate, at least 2,000 feet away. After the two of them stopped, their expressions became extremely solemn. Yi Xian looked towards the distance and saw a young woman on a horse about 600 m away. The young woman was around 17 or 18 years old, and she looked very cool. A genius from the Divine Kingdom. At this moment, many people had gathered on the city walls, and they were all geniuses from the various desolate worlds. Below the city walls, the young woman pointed at Yi Xian and Mo Xia, and then she gestured for them to attack together. How arrogant! How could they endure this? Mo Xia was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Allow me." Mo Xia looked at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. Yi Xian walked over to the young woman and looked at her. Super genius from the Divine Kingdom, do you dare to receive a strike from me? Hearing this, Mo Xia almost fainted. The young woman looked at Yi Xian and then pointed at her own head, "Come." Yi Xian said, "Then I won't be polite." As he finished speaking, he was already in front of the young woman. However, before he could draw his sword, the young woman suddenly unsheathed her saber and slashed. Instant. The moment the blade fell, Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly dodged to the back, but it was still a little too late. A huge wound was directly torn open on his chest. Blood gushed out. Yi Xian's expression was solemn. In that instant, if he had been a little slower, he would have been dismembered. What a fast saber. Yi Xian looked at the young woman and said angrily, "Didn't you agree to receive a strike from me while standing?" Where's the trust between people? The young woman raised her hand and slashed. This time, Yi Xian was prepared. The moment the young woman swung her saber, he rushed forward and slashed down, executing Heaven's Sword. As soon as the sword slashed down, the saber light in front of Yi Xian was directly torn apart. At the same time, a saber light suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian's sword slashed upwards. Clang! A clear sound of something breaking suddenly resounded. At this moment, the young woman had returned to her horse, and the saber in her hand had been broken into two. On the city wall, everyone looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. What a sharp sword! A divine weapon. Everyone talks about how strong Yi Xian is. In my opinion, it's all because of this sword. Without this sword, his strength would definitely be greatly reduced. Below the city wall, the young woman looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Swordsman, do you dare not use this sword? Let's have a fair fight. Yi Xian thought about it and said, sure, but let's make a bet. The young woman looked at Yi Xian. What bet? Yi Xian said, if I don't use this sword, and you can't kill me in 3 moves, you have to give me the horse you're riding on. Star River Colt. The young woman looked at Yi Xian. If you can beat me without this sword, I'll give it to you. But if you can't beat me, you have to give me your sword. Yi Xian's mouth twitched. This woman actually wanted his sword. Yi Xian said, Your Excellency, you and I are the world's most dazzling geniuses. If we're only this big, I'm afraid we'll fight for months. How about this, each of us will make a move, and neither of us can dodge. We can only take it head on, and whoever retreats the furthest will lose. How about that? The young woman looked at Yi Xian. Sure. Yi Xian nodded. You're the girl, you go first. The young woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, Can I use a saber? As soon as she finished speaking, she waved the broken saber in her hand. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Can you use your hands? The young woman gazed at Yi Xian. Even if you're shameless, there's still a limit. Thank you. Yi Xian was speechless. The young woman said, I can use this saber, and you can use another sword. Only then will we be able to bring forth our true strengths, all right? Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded, all right. Go ahead. The young woman leaped off the Star River Colt, and then she walked slowly towards Yi Xian. This Yi Xian won't use a sword? The young woman looked at Yi Xian and said, Is that so? Then let me see. As she spoke, she secretly put up her guard. Yi Xian nodded, and in the next moment, a small, empty character suddenly appeared between his brows. Space Dao Law. The moment the Space Dao Law appeared, the space around the young woman turned illusory. In the next moment, before the young woman could react, she had already appeared thousands of feet away. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. The young woman was also dumbfounded. Space had changed position. Yi Xian looked at the young woman not far away and said, You've lost. Lost. The young woman clenched her left hand, and her expression was gloomy. She couldn't accept it. She naturally couldn't accept it. How could she accept losing in such a way? Yi Xian smiled and said, What, genius from God Nation, are you sore losers? If you can't accept it, that's fine too. Take your horse and leave. I won't force you. The young woman gazed at Yi Xian and said, Remember what you said. As soon as she finished speaking, she leaped onto her horse, and then she turned around and vanished into the distance. Yi Xian was stunned. What the hell? What the hell? She really left? Where's the pride of God Nation? Yi Xian was stunned. This woman doesn't play by the rules. Right at this moment, a cold laugh suddenly resounded from the city wall. So that's the genius sword saint of legend. Does he only know how to rely on external objects? Yi Xian turned around to look at the man on the city wall. At this moment, the man was looking at him as well. The Tao Validation Realm. The man didn't look old and was around the age of 23 or 24. Since he was able to attain the Tao Validation Realm at such an age, then he was definitely not an ordinary person. Yi Xian didn't get angry, and he said with a smile, "External objects are a form of strength as well, right?" The man laughed coldly. "Then don't you think it's embarrassing?" "Even if you don't think it's embarrassing to rely on such opportunistic tricks when facing an expert of the God Nation, we all do." Yi Xian asked, "Then why didn't you come down and fight her one-on-one just now?" The man sneered. "I wanted to see your performance." Yi Xian suddenly disappeared from the spot. The man's pupils constricted. The next moment, he suddenly punched forward. Chi! As Yi Xian's sword arrived, an arm directly flew out. It was the man's arm. At the same time, the man directly retreated dozens of meters. Not far away, Yi Xian glanced at the man. "Since you want to see my performance, then shut up." The man was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly looked straight at him. "I dare you to say one more word." The man said fiercely, "Yi Xian, if you have the ability, don't take that sword." "You." Right at this moment, a flying sword suddenly flashed across the field. Before the man could react, his head directly flew out. Everyone present was dumbfounded. He really killed him? Not far away, the man's blood suddenly transformed into a ray of bloodlight that was absorbed by Yi Xian, and Yi Xian's entire body started to tremble. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly sounded out from the side. "Who allowed you to kill people here?" Yi Xian turned around and grinned. "Sorry. I still want to kill." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of red light suddenly spread out from his body, and the blood all over his body actually started to boil. Within the World Prison Pagoda, Yu's voice suddenly sounded out. "His bloodline is acting up. This fellow can't suppress his bloodline." Chapter 600. Bloodline. After Yi Xian killed the first person, the blood in his body began to slowly boil. After his blood boiled, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Kill. He really wanted to kill. At this moment, even his sword intent couldn't suppress this thought. A middle-aged man stood in front of Yi Xian. When the middle-aged man heard Yi Xian's words, his eyes instantly turned cold. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Leave quickly, I don't want to kill." "Oh no, I want to kill." Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his head to look at the middle-aged man, and in the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward. The middle-aged man's expression changed, and he stabbed the spear in his hand forward. Hiss! As soon as the spear came into contact with Yi Xian's executing heaven sword, it was directly split into two. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly retreated. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly rushed towards a man beside him. The man's expression changed drastically, and he turned around and ran. Just like that, Yi Xian madly slashed people in the battlefield, and he slashed anyone he saw. Yi Xian has gone mad. All of a sudden, the Great Wall descended into chaos. No one stopped Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's mind was clearly not normal. Not only that, but he was also holding that heaven-defying sword in his hand, and no one could stop that sword of his. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was Spiritual Master Chu. Yi Xian didn't care at all, and he raised his hand and slashed down. Spiritual Master Chu frowned slightly. His figure flashed, and he directly dodged Yi Xian's sword, and then he pointed a finger at the center of Yi Xian's brows. Yi Xian's body trembled, and in the next moment, the bloodline in his body was suppressed by a mysterious force. But soon, the blood in Yi Xian's body began to boil violently like boiling water. Bang! A red light suddenly rushed out from the top of Yi Xian's head, and the powerful force directly shook Taoist Master Chu to the point of retreating several steps. Seeing this scene, perfected Master Chu's expression changed slightly. He looked to the side. Together. As soon as he finished speaking, Tang Yan appeared in front of Yi Xian. Very quickly, both of them pointed at the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows at the same time, and the powerful force was instantly pushed back into Yi Xian's body. However, his blood was still boiling and showed no signs of stopping. Sage Chu said in a deep voice, "Yi Xian, you have to cooperate with the two of us." Yi Xian nodded. Soon, with Yi Xian's cooperation, the blood in his body gradually calmed down. Sensing this scene, Daoist Master Chu and Tang Yan's expressions relaxed. At this time, Yi Xian had returned to normal. After returning to normal, Yi Xian's expression was incomparably grave. He discovered that there was something wrong with his bloodline. At this moment, Perfected Chu said, "What bloodline is this?" "What bloodline?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I don't know either." Perfected Chu said in a deep voice, "Your bloodline is extremely abnormal. Now that it has awakened, it can be activated at any time because of your emotions. However, you can't suppress it now, so you have to control your emotions, understand?" Yi Xian nodded slightly. "All right." Emotions. He also discovered that his bloodline was related to his emotions. Just now, when he had killing intent, this bloodline automatically activated. He couldn't control it at all. He had to be careful. Yi Xian's expression gradually became serious. Although this bloodline could obtain great power after being activated, he couldn't suppress this bloodline at all. He didn't want to be controlled by this bloodline. At this moment, Perfected Chu said, "Come with us. We have something to discuss with you." With that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian shrugged his shoulders, then looked at Mo Xia, who was a little worried, and said with a smile, "It's fine." Mo Xia nodded. It had to be said that Yi Xian's appearance just now was quite terrifying. Yi Xian followed Perfected Chu and Tang Yan into the Heaven Trampling Hall. At this moment, there were 4 people in the Heaven Trampling Hall. He knew 3 of them. They were the Star Lord, the Demon King, and the Southern Sect Martial Master. The other person was a middle-aged man. This person was the current deputy commander of the Divine Tao Army, Chu Kuang. As for the Divine Tao Lord, there were a total of 3 deputy commanders. Chu Kuang glanced at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in his eyes. This was because the attitude of Perfected Chu and the others towards Yi Xian was as if they were treating an expert of the same level. As for Yi Xian, he was clearly only at the 10,000 Dharma realm. Of course, the identity of a sword saint could not be ignored. However, a mere sword saint should not be in their eyes. Chu Kuang did not ask further and immediately said, "Seniors, the commander is in seclusion and cannot come out for the time being. Please forgive him." Perfected Chu said, "It's fine. Let's get down to business." Chu Kuang nodded slightly. According to the information we received, the Divine Master of the Divine Kingdom is gathering the army and various experts of the kingdom. As for how many there are, we don't know. We only know that it will definitely not be a small number. Moreover, the martial arts civilization in the Divine Kingdom is developed. The strength of these experts might exceed our imagination. Yi Xian suddenly said, "We know too little about the Divine Kingdom." Everyone looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said softly, "We know too little about them. This is definitely a very disadvantageous thing for us. The 2 armies have not fought yet, so we know nothing about them. However, they know our strength. Under these circumstances, we have already lost by quite a bit." But instead of thinking about how to retrieve his corpse, you guys are here every day thinking about how to kill me. At this point, he pointed his sword at the Astral Master. "Especially you, Astral Master. Isn't your Order Alliance very arrogant? Go and be arrogant to the Divine Kingdom. Why are you targeting me? I didn't torture the corpse of your Order Alliance's ancestor." The Astral Master stared at Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Yi Xian was not afraid. His body gradually glowed with a blood-red light. His expression was ferocious. I don't understand. Your ancestor's corpse is hanging in the god burial plain. How can you guys tolerate it? If it were me, I would have *King gone to the divine kingdom. At the side, the southern sect martial master suddenly said, City Lord Yi, the divine kingdom isn't that simple. Your thinking is too extreme. Calm down first. Yi Xian said angrily, calm down what? This astral master is obviously trying to kill me. Why should I calm down? The southern sect martial master shook his head helplessly. City Lord Yi, we didn't say that you must go to the divine kingdom to risk your life. Can you not be so agitated? Yi Xian said coldly, the 5 of you are a group. You only know how to bully me. The southern sect martial master was speechless. At this time, spiritual master Chu said, little friend Yi, calm down first. Yi Xian nodded. All right, I'll calm down. As soon as he finished speaking, he sat back down. However, he still didn't put away his sword. Spiritual master Chu hesitated for a moment and said, City Lord Yi, the 6 of us are the focus of the divine kingdom. Our every move will definitely alarm them. Thus, the 6 of us are unable to head to the divine kingdom. But you're different. The divine kingdom won't pay too much attention to you. You're strong, so, Yi Xian suddenly said, I'm afraid of death. Everyone was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, even though I'm afraid of death, I'm still willing to go to the divine kingdom. Everyone looked at Yi Xian with slight surprise. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I know. We should unite now. Everyone needs me now, so I'm duty-bound. However, I have a few conditions. If everyone agrees to them, I'll head to the divine kingdom. Spiritual Master Chu nodded slightly. Speak. Yi Xian said, first, I need at least 20 creation realm swords. Of course, Dao realm swords are fine too. Secondly, I need a defensive treasure that is at least at the Dao realm. Third, I'm poor. I need some god crystals. A few million will do. Finally, I need everyone to guarantee my safety. As for how to guarantee it, I'll leave it to the seniors to think of a way. Speaking up to here, he looked at Spiritual Master Chu and the others. I'm risking my life for everyone. My requests aren't too much, right? Everyone was speechless. P.S. Thank you for your recent donations and monthly votes. I've been under a lot of pressure because I'm afraid that I won't write well and I'll lose you. Up until now, I've met many reader friends. Among these friends, some of them will disappear as they walk. And I don't dare to disturb them. I'm afraid that they'll say, your new book is as ugly as *T. That would be a 100-fold blow to my young heart. Most of the time, readers only recognize the book and not the author. If it's good, I'll read it. If it's good, I'll vote. Not good? Sorry, I don't *King care who you are. I used to be like this too. I can only work hard to write so that you like my book, like me as a person. Oh, no, as long as you like my book, you're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.